Tonight, we're exploring every Targaryen prophecy and dragon dream. This is a topic with a lot to uncover, but I'll keep my narration calm so you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Long before the Targaryens ever set eyes on the shores of Westeros, they were a noble but relatively minor house among the 40 Dragonlord families of the Valyrian freehold. They lived in a world of towering spires, active volcanoes, and unimaginable sorcery, where dragons filled the skies and the power of their empire seemed absolute and eternal. Yet beneath this veneer of supreme dominance, a quiet shift was preparing to unfold, sparked not by a clash of armies or a rebellion of slaves, but by the sleeping mind of a young maiden. Daenys Targaryen, forever remembered as Daenys the Dreamer, was the daughter of Lord Rhaenyra Targaryen. Unlike her peers who dreamed of courtly politics or the soaring heights of Dragonback, Daenys was visited by visions that felt far more like memories of a future yet unwritten. One night, she awoke from a dream of fire and ash, a vision so vivid and terrifying that it shook her to her core. She saw the great peninsula of Valyria torn apart, the mountains cracking open to spew rivers of molten stone, and the sky itself burning as the very ground swallowed the proudest empire the world had ever known. She saw the dragons perish in the flames, and the waters of the 14 flames rising to drown what remained. To the other dragonlords of Valyria, such a vision would have been dismissed as the mere whims of a sensitive child. But Rhaenyra Targaryen believed his daughter. He trusted the strange, heavy legacy of the dragon dreams, a rare, hereditary trait that slept in the blood of their house. Acting on her warning, Rhaenyra made the monumental decision to sell his estates, gather his family, his wealth, and his 5 dragons, and self-exile to the damp, isolated volcanic island of Dragonstone on the far edge of the known world. His peers laughed at him, viewing the move as an act of cowardice and madness. For 12 years, the Targaryens lived in exile on their lonely island, watching the distant horizon. Then, the doom fell. In a single day of unimaginable fury, the Valyrian freehold was utterly obliterated, just as Daenys had foreseen. The empire was gone, its secrets lost, and its people turned to ash. Of all the Dragonlords, only the Targaryens survived, preserved by a dream. This foundational event permanently forged the Targaryen identity, binding their destiny to the elusive, symbolic, and often heavy burden of prophecy. As the generations passed on Dragonstone, these dreams did not fade. Instead, they evolved, shaping the minds of those who inherited the dragon blood. They were not clear, literal instructions, but rather tapestries of metaphor and shadow. They warned of disasters, hinted at great destinies, and demanded immense sacrifice. Centuries after Daenys, her descendant, Aegon I, would look out across the narrow sea toward the fractured kingdoms of Westeros. For generations, history recorded his conquest as a campaign of pure ambition, a desire to rule. But woven deep within the ancestral lore of his house was a different truth, a secret passed down from ruler to heir. Aegon too had dreamed. He saw a great winter blowing from the distant, nameless north, bringing with it a darkness that would destroy the world of the living. He believed that only a united realm, ruled by the blood of the dragon, would have the strength to stand against this cold tide. The conquest was not just an act of war, but a desperate preparation for a salvation yet to come. This dream, known to a select few as the Song of Ice and Fire, would ripple through the centuries, influencing kings and queens, driving some to madness and others to heroic, tragic ends. The blood of the dragon was always a physical reality. It manifested in the silver-gold hair, the violet eyes, and the ability to bond with the largest and most terrible creatures the world had ever seen. But there is another quality in that blood, a far rarer and far less understood quality, a quality that would ultimately define the dynasty's entire psychology. It is the taint of foresight, what the world came to know as dragon dreams. The Valyrian sages, masters of sorcery and bloodbinding, could never fully map the pathways of these dreams. It was not a simple inheritance, passed cleanly from father to son. It was a capricious ghost in the bloodline, skipping rulers, visiting maesters, spurning warriors, and favoring maidens. Why Daenys and not her brothers? Why Aegon the Conqueror, but not his sister wives? The gift seemed tied to the deepest wellsprings of Valyrian magic, a flame that flickered unpredictably within the generations. It was a power that did not care for the recipient's ambition, their sanity, or their station. To dream the dragon dreams was to be touched by something absolute and ancient, something that offered no instruction manual and demanded no permission. This is the biological mystery at the heart of the house. The dragon riders could control their mounts through whips and horns, and a psychic bond forged in the egg. But they could not control the dreams. The dreams came, or they did not. And for those who received them, the experience was rarely a comfort. Consider the weight. Daenys the Dreamer was a teenage girl when the fate of her entire civilization whispered itself into her sleeping mind. Her father, Lord Rhaenyra, believed her, a decision that saved their entire house from the doom. But what of the dreamer herself? What does it do to a person to be given a front row seat to the end of the world, to know a truth that no one else can see? The histories record her act of deliverance. They are almost entirely silent on her inner life. That silence speaks volumes. She must have spent the rest of her days wondering if the dream would recur, if she had seen everything, or if she had missed a detail that would doom them all. The survivor's guilt of a single seer who could not save the millions left behind in the fires of Valyria. This psychological toll is the constant companion of every dragon dreamer. The visions did not arrive as clear instructions. They came as a torrent of symbolic imagery, fire and ice, beasts warring with beasts, dead things walking in the snow. They were incomplete, terrifying, and utterly irrefutable to the dreamer. Imagine waking from a vision of the world drowning in darkness. You carry the absolute certainty of this coming doom, but every attempt to explain it to those around you sounds like the deepest madness. The doubt must be corrosive. Am I seeing the truth? Or is this the Targaryen madness the bards sing about? The family itself could never settle this argument. On one hand, the dreams were the ultimate justification for their rule. Their claim to Westeros was not built on ambition alone. It was built on prophetic necessity. Aegon the Conqueror did not just want the Seven Kingdoms. He believed he had to unite them, to save them from a winter only he could see. This transformed foreign invasion into a messianic duty. To be a true dragon was to be a dreamer, the mark of a chosen ruler. But the coin of the Targaryen psyche has two sides. The same blood that brought prophecy brought instability. The maesters and the small folk whispered of the madness of dragons, and they were not entirely wrong. How could they be, when the very trait that saved the house from the doom was the same trait that drove King Aerys II to hear voices in the flames and see enemies in every shadow? Aerys was a dragon dreamer. His visions did not guide him toward wisdom. They guided him toward paranoia and pyromania, toward the brink of annihilation. The divine right and the curse are one and the same. To dream is to be chosen. To dream is to suffer. The family history is a cycle of dreamers saving the world and dreamers burning it down, and the line between the two is often invisible until it is far too late. This brings us to the most fundamental danger of dragon dreams. A king with absolute power and a symbolic vision is a terrifying weapon pointing in every direction, often back at himself. Prophecy is not a straight line to safety. It is a labyrinth of mirrors. Every character who acts on a prophecy walks a knife edge between salvation and destruction. A misinterpreted dream can start a war. A misread symbol can justify a massacre. Aegon the Conqueror saw a coming darkness from the north. He united Westeros. A perfect interpretation, it seems. But what if he was wrong about the timing? The long night did not come in his lifetime. The others did not march south for another 300 years. Did his grand consolidation create a realm that was easier to break than to hold? Did the dance of the dragons happen precisely because the realm was forced together too quickly by a prophecy only one family understood? The Targaryens possessed the highest and most dangerous form of authority in the known world, the certainty of divine truth. When a king is convinced of his own righteousness, when fate itself speaks to him in the quiet hours of the night, who can stand in his way? No one. The only thing that stops a dragon dream is a spear, a sword, or a rival dragon who dreams a different dream. The obsession with prophecy did not end with the doom or the conquest. It burrowed deep into the family's identity, becoming the secret engine of their greatest triumphs and their most catastrophic failures. The dreams demanded action, wisdom, and sacrifice. They delivered isolation, paranoia, and misunderstanding. The dragons were the instruments of their power, but the dreams were the source of their strange, magnetic, and ultimately self-consuming ambition. This lineage of dreams, stretching from Daenys to Aegon, did not dissipate into the air. It was passed directly down the line of kings, guarded as a state secret, more valuable than any crown. It was a burden that would soon fall to a reluctant king named Viserys the Peaceful, a man who never saw a dragon in his own dreams, but who was entrusted with a promise that would tear his family apart. The burden of foresight is a heavy one. As we have discussed, the dragon dreams are not gentle whispers but violent floods of symbolic imagery. To see the future is to be haunted by it. But what happens when a single dream is so vivid, so terrifyingly specific, that it compels a family to abandon their entire world? This is the story of Daenys the Dreamer, and the most successful evacuation in the history of Westeros and Essos. Daenys Targaryen was the daughter of Lord Rhaenyra. Her mind was touched by the prophetic fire that ran through her blood, and one night, the fire gave her a terrible gift. She saw the doom of Valyria. She did not just see smoke on the horizon. She witnessed the cataclysmic destruction of the freehold. Her dream was a torrent of sensory horror, the 14 flames erupting not in controlled power, but in suicidal fury. The mountains of the peninsula spewing rivers of molten stone. The sky raining fire hot enough to melt the very foundations of the empire. She saw the land itself break apart and sink beneath the boiling sea. It was not a warning of a distant, avoidable future. It was a certainty, a promise of ash. Lord Rhaenyra listened to his daughter. In most stories, a father dismissing a daughter's strange dream would be the tragic turning point. But Rhaenyra believed. He made a decision that must have felt impossible for a noble of the freehold. He sold his holdings in Valyria and the surrounding lands. He gathered his family, their dragons, their finest steel, and their most cherished possessions. They boarded their ships and sailed for the remote, volcanic outpost of Dragonstone. This small island at the edge of the narrow sea was a place of exile, a holding too insignificant for the other great houses to even covet. To abandon the heart of civilization for this damp, lonely fortress over a dream defied every logic of the age of Valyria watched this retreat with open scorn. The Targaryens were already considered a lesser house, their dragons smaller, their influence minimal. Now, they were fleeing a phantom threat. The other lords laughed behind their hands, and often openly. How could anything threaten the center of the known world? They mocked her as a superstitious fool, led astray by a girl's nightmares. The isolation of Dragonstone must have felt profound during those years. The Targaryens sat alone on the edge of the map, waiting for a disaster that no one else could see. And then, the invincible capital died. The 14 flames did exactly what Daenys had seen. They erupted with a force that shook the entire world. The doom of Valyria was not a slow decline. It was a sudden, fiery apocalypse. The peninsula shattered. The skies blackened and rained fire. The blood mages and dragon lords who had ruled the world for thousands of years were wiped from existence in a single catastrophic day. In the aftermath, the Empire was a smoking ruin, a demon-haunted sea where no ship could safely sail. In that moment, every insult, every laughing remark, every dismissive whisper hurled at the Targaryens was silenced. The 40 families who mocked them were ashes. The Targaryens were the only survivors, the sole dragon lords left in all the world. Daenys' dream had not just saved her family, it had completely reshaped the known world. So the blood of the dragon survived, preserved not by steel or fire, but by a dream. But the prophetic gift did not die with Daenys. It remained in the blood, an inheritance that would continue to shape the course of an entire continent. From their island fortress, the Targaryens looked westward. They carried the memory of the doom, the burden of being the last of their kind, and the promise of the dreams that still whispered to them in the night. For a century, they watched and waited, and then a new dream arose. A conqueror, Aegon Targaryen, who also saw a future that needed to be forged, not feared. Aegon's dream was not of fire, but of ice. It was a vision of a terrible winter blowing in from the distant, frozen north, bringing with it a darkness that would consume the world of the living. He saw the end of humanity, unless the realms of men could be united under a single ruler, a dragon lord who could stand as a shield against the cold. This secret prophecy, which he called the Song of Ice and Fire, became the true driving force behind his conquest. It was the same prophetic burden that had guided his ancestor Daenys, but while her dream demanded flight, Aegon's demanded dominion. For nearly 300 years, this secret was passed from king to heir, a quiet whisper in the dark that justified every war, every sacrifice, and every crown. The Targaryens were not just rulers, they were guardians of a future they alone could foresee. And so the legacy of the Dreamers lived on, forever balancing the scales between the destructive fire of their blood and the freezing dark of the world they were destined to save. Rhaenyra Targaryen made a choice that history would remember as the defining moment of his house, but at the time, it was just a gamble based on a nightmare. He sold his holdings in the Valyrian freehold and moved his entire household to the fortress of Dragonstone. It was a decision that must have seemed absurd to the outside world. There was no sign, no earthquake, no fire. Just the word of a young girl and the visions that haunted her sleep. And so they waited. 12 years passed. 12 years of tense isolation on a volcanic island outpost, cut off from the glory of the empire they had left behind. The Targaryens built their new life in the shadow of the Dragonmont, surrounded by stone and sea. They were not refugees in the usual sense. They were exiles by choice. And every day that the freehold stood, the decision of Rhaenyra looked more and more like folly. The other dragon lords mocked him. The empire moved on. But Daenys insisted. The dream was not wrong. It was simply patient. Then the doom came. The doom of Valyria was not a single event. It was a storm. Volcanic eruptions that split the peninsula in two. Earthquakes that drowned entire cities in the sea. A firestorm so vast it consumed the sky itself. From the ramparts of Dragonstone, the Targaryens watched the end of the world. The horizon burned red for days, and the air carried ash and smoke across the water. They were far enough to be safe. They were close enough to feel the death of everything they had known. In that moment, Daenys the Dreamer was transformed. She was no longer just a girl with vivid nightmares. She was a prophet. The ridicule stopped. The questions stopped. The survival of their house was no longer a matter of luck. It was a miracle. It was proof. Her writings, collected under the title, became the family's most guarded holy text. It was not a book for outsiders. It was not a text for scholars. It was a private scripture, copied by hand and bound in dragon hide, passed from parent to child. It contained not just the warning of the doom, but a collection of her other visions, a framework for a new worldview, a key to the future. The Targaryens began to see themselves differently. They were not simply a noble house that had fled at the right time. They were a chosen people, preserved by prophecy. The doom was not a random catastrophe. It was a culling. Out of the greatest civilization the world had ever seen, only one family was saved. Why them? The answer was in the text. Every child born on Dragonstone was raised with this understanding. They were not just survivors, they were instruments of fate. The 12 years of waiting had ended, but a new kind of waiting had begun. Their survival was meant for something. A grander purpose, an unrevealed destiny. The writings of Daenys hinted at a role that was yet to be played, a conflict that was yet to come, an enemy that was not made of fire and stone. They held their dragons close. They guarded their bloodline. They read and reread the words of Daenys. The dreams had saved them once. They would look to the dreams again. Centuries passed on that island. Dragonstone became a fortress of memory. The Targaryens remained isolated, their numbers small, their faith in prophecy absolute. The dragon dreams did not stop with Daenys. They continued through the generations. A whisper of a threat that was not volcanic, a promise of a savior, a figure of fire standing against a cold darkness. The dreams were patient. They had waited through the fall of an empire. They would wait for the moment the world needed them most. And one day, a new dreamer would rise, a conqueror who looked not at the smoking ruins of a fallen homeland, but at the snow-covered lands of a sleeping continent to the west. He carried the book, he carried the memory, and he carried a vision of something coming from the north. Aegon looked across the Blackwater and saw not just 6 kingdoms to conquer, but a fractured realm that needed to be bound together to survive the coming winter. The conquest was never about simple ambition or the lust for a crown. It was a mobilization, a desperate preparation. For nearly 300 years, the secret of the conqueror was whispered from king to heir, a burden of fire and blood, carried in the dark, known only to those who sat upon the Iron Throne. They believed that a Targaryen must rule Westeros, not for the glory of their house, but because only a dragon lord could unite the living against the dead. This was the true legacy of Daenys the Dreamer. This was the thread that ran from the smoking ruins of Valyria to the frozen wall of the far north. A single line of prophecy, preserved through fire, waiting for the night that would never end. And so, the dragons flew west, carrying the weight of a world they were destined to save. Daenys' preserved writings, signs and portents, became the family's most guarded holy text. For 100 years, the Targaryens on Dragonstone lived in a state of watchful waiting, searching those ancient pages for clues about the future their bloodline was destined to meet. They were a family shaped by survival, but they knew the prophetic gift was a strange current, one that could lie dormant for generations before surging again in an unexpected heir. Aegon the Conqueror was that heir. History remembers him for his dragons, his queens, and his ambition to forge the Iron Throne, but history rarely acknowledges the true foundation of his conquest. Aegon carried a dragon dream of his own, a vision so specific and so terrifying that it dictated the entire course of his life. He never spoke of it in open court, but he preserved it as a sacred truth for his successors. He called it the Song of Ice and Fire. In his dream, Aegon saw a darkness unlike anything the world had known. It came not from the east, where the doom had devoured Valyria, but from the absolute north. A terrible winter, a living cold that had no mercy, no negotiation, no end. It blew down from the polar wastes like a silent breath of death, and it consumed everything. The world of the living was extinguished. He saw the dead marching under a starless sky, an army without number, without fear, without the need for rest. The old stories of the long night were not myth, they were a promise. Aegon looked upon the map of Westeros, a continent of 7 quarreling kingdoms, and he understood the true purpose of his vision. No single kingdom could stand against this. The north would fall, the riverlands would drown in ice. The Reach would be frozen in its fields. They would be devoured one by one, their petty jealousies meaningless against the silence of the grave. The only shield against this threat was absolute unity. A united Westeros under a Targaryen king, wielding the power of dragons, was the only force that could face the darkness. The crown was never the goal, it was the tool. This secret reframes the entire war of conquest. Aegon was not a tyrant driven by greed or glory. The burning of Harrenhal, the field of fire, the submission of every king who bent the knee, it was all a desperate act of preservation. He was not building an empire for himself. He was forging a weapon for the world. He was forcing the continent to unite, so that it might survive a war that no one else even knew was coming. The Iron Throne was a command, a shield commissioned against the apocalypse. The weight of this burden was immense. Aegon knew he might not live to see the long night. He was planting a tree in whose shade he would never sit. He passed the dream to his descendants, whispering the secret in the ear of each heir, a tradition of hidden duty that bound the Targaryen monarchs to a purpose greater than their own reigns. The kings who followed carried this knowledge, and it shaped their decisions, their fears, and their failures. The secret of the Song of Ice and Fire travelled down the royal line through the long reign of Jaehaerys the Conciliator and into the troubled court of Viserys I. Viserys, a king who loved history and prophecy, understood the dream deeply, and as his health failed and the succession of his daughter Rhaenyra came under threat, he made a fateful choice. He took her to the painted table and told her the truth. He told her that a Targaryen must sit the Iron Throne to unite the realm against the cold, and that this duty was the sole reason their dynasty existed. He entrusted her with the prophecy, believing the unity it demanded could heal a fracturing family. Instead, the secret became another treasure, fought over in the war that followed. The dance of the dragons shattered the very unity Aegon had sacrificed everything to build. The dragons killed each other, the stronghold of the prophecy crumbled, and the Song of Ice and Fire grew fainter, carried only by the blood that survived the fire. The dream of the long night did not die with the dragons. It remained, a ghost waiting in the broken halls of the Red Keep, waiting for the fire to be reborn, waiting for a ruler strong enough to finally stand against the cold, waiting for the song to be sung by a new voice. Aegon the Conqueror carried the weight of that vision for the rest of his life. He knew that words on parchment could be lost, burned, or forgotten. A dream, no matter how vivid, could fade with the dreamer. Aegon needed something permanent, something that could not be ignored by his successors, something that would outlive him and speak the truth to every generation that followed. And so, the prophecy was pulled from the realm of the abstract and hammered into steel. The forging of the Catspaw dagger was a secret ritual in itself. Aegon took the words of his dream to the finest smiths of Dragonstone. Or perhaps he worked the bellows himself. There are no records of its making, only the result. The blade was folded 100 times in the dragonfire, the red glow reflecting in the Conqueror's eyes, into the very ripples of the Valyrian steel, in the ancient glyphs of old Valyria. The prophecy was written, not carved with a chisel, but woven into the structure of the metal, etched by flame and magic, an inscription that was not a surface mark, but a part of the steel's very soul. When the blade cooled, the words vanished from sight. They became invisible, hidden entirely within the beautiful ripples of the steel, a secret that could only be read in fire. The Catspaw dagger, Valyrian steel, a dragonbone hilt, a pommel of black obsidian. It was a small weapon, easily concealed, but it carried the weight of the world. It was not meant for battle. It was meant for the flame. It was meant for the air, though it would later become infamous for a different, far smaller assassination attempt. Its original purpose was monumental. It was the key to the throne, the final proof of the Conqueror's true intent. The blade itself was etched with a single line of prophecy, waking only when heated. From my blood come the prince that was promised. It was the physical summation of Aegon's entire dream, the promise forged into steel, the secret of the blade, and the words hidden within it could not simply be announced to the court. The burden of the Song of Ice and Fire was too heavy for ambitious ears. The truth could be weaponized by enemies, or twisted by those who did not understand the weight of the coming darkness. So a sacred ritual was established. The truth passed from the reigning monarch to the chosen heir alone, in the privacy of the royal chambers. The new heir would be shown the dagger. They would be told to hold the blade close to the flame of a candle or a brazier. As the heat kissed the Valyrian steel, the ripples would shift, and the hidden glyphs would glow a faint red and orange into view. Imagine the scene. The quiet of the castle at night. The old king, his hand shaking with age or illness, guiding the young hands of the heir. The small flame. The slow heating of the steel. The words emerging like ghosts from the past. A connection not just between a ruler and a successor, but between the present and the apocalypse. A sacred oath whispered in the dark. The heir would read the prophecy themselves, seeing the frozen darkness with their own eyes, making the warning their own personal burden. This was the ritual of the flame. There were no witnesses. No maester recorded it. It was a quiet, terrifying conversation between a king and their shadow. Some heirs wept at the revelation. Some were filled with pride at being chosen. But every single one of them was bound by the same terrible truth. From Aegon the Conqueror to Daenys perhaps, then to Maegor, then to Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Each Targaryen who knew the truth passed it down this secret chain, one monarch to the next, a genetic and ceremonial handoff. The sword was not just a weapon, it was a memory bank, a physical anchor for a prophecy that spanned the ages, ensuring the transmission of the secret through the generations until the moment it was needed. But this system had a deep structural vulnerability baked into its very foundation. It relied entirely on the perfection of a single line of succession. It required that the king choose the right heir, and that the heir truly understand the weight of the secret. And it required the king to actually perform the ritual. What happened if a king died suddenly, struck down in a tourney, or by a blade in the night, before he could whisper the words? What if the chosen heir was an infant, too young to hold the dagger or comprehend the darkness it described? What if the monarch simply decided the burden was too great for their children to bear and took the secret to their grave? History had already proven how fragile this chain could be. King Maegor the Cruel died on the Iron Throne itself, leaving no clear heir. Did he whisper the secret to someone before the throne cut him down? Or was the prophecy silent for a generation, hidden only in the steel of the dagger, waiting for a worthy reader? We do not know the gaps in the chain, only the anchors that survived. Jaehaerys the Conciliator held the secret for 55 years, perhaps the longest of any Targaryen king. He chose to break tradition and name Balon, his second son, over Rhaenys. The secret was passed. Then Balon died. Then Jaehaerys had to choose again, and he chose Viserys, the grandson he was not entirely sure was worthy of the burden. The entire process was a gamble. The entire future of the realm, the very warning of a second doom, rested on a single conversation that could easily be lost to time. Viserys I knew this vulnerability intimately. He had received the prophecy from his cousin, King Jaehaerys I, very late in Jaehaerys' long life. He often spoke of his wish that the old king had told him sooner, given him more time to prepare for the burden he would carry. He understood the crushing weight of being the sole guardian of a world-ending threat. And when his wife Aemma died, leaving him with a daughter instead of a son, he made a decision that separated duty from tradition. He named Rhaenyra his heir, and he placed that same weight, that crushing secret, upon her young shoulders. He took her to the Iron Throne in the dark of the night. He held the cat's-paw dagger to the flame of a candle, and he showed her the truth. He whispered the dream to her, forging a new link in the chain. The dagger passed from his hands to hers. The secret had to survive, but as Viserys I's health failed, and the realm began to fracture over the very succession he had tried to engineer, the fragility of this single chain became the central tragedy of the Targaryen dynasty. The prophecy was a truth for one person, but that person was entering a political world that was rapidly collapsing into war. The chain of succession was about to break under the weight of the crown. The ritual of the flame, the secret of the dagger, it was designed for a world of unity. But the unity of House Targaryen was about to shatter, and with the breaking of the family, the fate of the prophecy itself hung in the balance, a fragile ember in a gathering storm of dragonfire. The Valyrian steel dagger was never meant for battle. It was a vessel, a letter sealed in flame, a burden passed from the hand of a dying king to the one who would inherit the truth of the world. By the time it reached King Viserys, the first of his name, the weight of that truth had become almost unbearable. He was the grandson of the old King Jaehaerys, a monarch chosen by the Great Council of 101 to continue the longest peace the Seven Kingdoms had ever known. But peace is a fragile thing, and Viserys carried inside him a knowledge that made peace feel like a prelude to a greater calamity. He knew the song of ice and fire. He knew what was coming from the absolute north, and he was desperate, above all else, to find the heir who could be strong enough to meet it. Viserys was a man who searched for signs in everything. He pored over the texts of Daenys the dreamer, the ancient writings of. He looked for meaning in a stone egg, in a flight of ravens, in the turning of the seasons. He believed himself to be a dreamer. He spoke of visions of a son, a king named Aegon who would ride a great dragon and unite the realm against the darkness. This obsession consumed him. It drove him to push his wife, Queen Aemma, through a brutal cycle of pregnancies. He wanted to fulfill the prophecy. The tragedy of Aemma Arryn's death is the hinge of his reign. In the birthing bed of the Red Keep, Viserys was forced to choose between his wife and the son he believed he needed. He chose the dream. Aegon was born, but Aemma was lost, and the wound never healed. And yet, even with his son before him, Viserys hesitated. He had already seen in Rhaenyra a kind of fire he dare not extinguish. He had already split the succession in his own heart. The decision to tell Rhaenyra the prophecy was the single most defining act of Viserys' rule. In the quiet of the Godswood, with the leaves of the weirwood tree rustling overhead, Viserys took his daughter aside. He held the Valyrian steel dagger, the secret that had only ever passed from the sovereign to the chosen successor. He told her the truth of Aegon, the conqueror's dream. He told her of the wall of ice, the winter that would swallow the world, the terrible cold darkness that only a unified realm could stand against. He told her that the Targaryens were not built for conquest. They were built for this war. By sharing that secret, Viserys was not just legitimizing her succession, he was sanctifying it. He was binding her to the highest duty in the realm. Rhaenyra did not just inherit a crown, she inherited a prophecy of doom, and the sacred weight of being the one who could stop it. Rhaenyra was never the same person after that moment in the Godswood. The knowledge of the prophecy gave her an ironclad sense of moral purpose. Before, she was ambitious, a princess who knew the taste of her own power. After, she was a queen who saw every political slight from the high towers as a threat to the survival of the living. She was not fighting for a chair in a great hall, she was fighting for the dawn. This is why she insisted so fiercely on her claim. It is why she pushed for loyalty from the dragon riders. She believed that the realm had to remain whole. The enemy from the north would not respect the petty squabbles of the houses who swore to her. The prophecy made her inflexible, certain, and deeply solitary. She carried the burden of knowing that if she failed, there would be no world left to rule. This drove her to embrace a war she knew could destroy her family, because her family was merely the shield. The song was the point. And here we arrive at the most painful irony in the entire Targaryen legacy. Viserys gave Rhaenyra the most unifying truth his family possessed, a truth meant to bind the realm against an external enemy. But he kept it a secret from his son, Aegon II. He kept it from the court. He kept it from the very men who would become her enemies. The prophecy became a hidden thing, a private justification that looked to the outside world like a senile king's favoritism. The Greens saw Rhaenyra's claim as an unnatural violation of tradition. They did not know about the dagger. They did not know the song. The Dance of the Dragons was fought in part because Viserys tried to prepare for a war against winter, but he lit the fire of succession beneath his daughter's throne. The dragons, the very weapons Aegon believed would save the world, were turned against each other in an orgy of blood and flame. Rhaegar killed Arax. Syrax fell from the sky. The realm was shattered. The Targaryens were broken. The unity required for the long night was annihilated by the very method Viserys chose to preserve. The dream of ice and fire consumed its own believers. When the fires of the dance finally died, the Targaryens were a shadow of their former selves. Their dragons were corpses in the fields, their power reduced to ash and bitter memory. The prophecy of the long night did not die, but it was buried. It lived on in the blood of the surviving line, distorted by grief, carried by kings who could barely protect their own cities. The Valyrian steel dagger passed to kings who were haunted, paranoid, and sometimes mad. The original understanding of the song, the unity it demanded, the preparation it required, was corrupted by the war it had caused. The dream waited, patient as the northern ice, for a new generation, for a child born across the narrow sea, born of salt and smoke, who could finally look into the flames and see the truth that Viserys saw, and the horror that his choice brought down upon their house. The song of ice and fire was not finished. It was simply waiting for the storm. From the moment Viserys I placed the burden of the crown and the secret of the dream upon his daughter, Rhaenyra's path was sealed by forces she could barely comprehend. She was handed a destiny entwined with the fate of the entire world, a secret kept from her half-brothers and the lords of the realm. This was the Song of Ice and Fire, and it became the core of her identity as the heir to the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra came to believe, with absolute certainty, that her claim was not merely a political right won through birth, it was a sacred duty. She saw herself as the chosen vessel through which the realm would be saved. In her mind, the prophecy of Aegon the Conqueror was a divine mandate. Only a united Westeros could stand against the long winter and the cold darkness that came with it, and only she, the named heir, could keep the realm united. This belief was both her greatest strength and her most profound weakness. It gave her an unshakable conviction that refused to bend even when the entire realm began to break. But a secret prophecy cannot remain a sacred trust when it becomes a tool of war. The Dance of the Dragons, the brutal war of succession between Rhaenyra and her half-brother Aegon II, was not just a fight for a throne. It was a war fought over the meaning of legitimacy. Rhaenyra's faction used the prophecy to argue that she had been anointed by the king himself, chosen by the gods to finish Aegon the Conqueror's work. Her opponents, the Greens, twisted the narrative to claim that Aegon II was the rightful king, and that any usurpation, even with a prophecy attached, was against the will of the gods. The Song of Ice and Fire, a vision of unity against a common foe, was weaponized. It became a shield for Rhaenyra's claim and a sword in the hands of her enemies. The very words meant to bind the realm together were now used to justify tearing it apart. This division directly contradicted Aegon, the Conqueror's original vision. Aegon dreamed of a united Westeros, a single kingdom strong enough to face an enemy that cared nothing for the petty squabbles of men. Instead of unity, the war created a festering wound. Families were set against families. Kingdoms were burned. The riverlands were drowned in blood. The crownlands were shattered. The war itself was a horror that defied the very idea of unity. It was not a clean war. It was a war of assassins and betrayals. It was a war where dragon fought dragon in the skies, Prince Aemon and Prince Daemon over the God's Eye. Their dragons locked in a death spiral that ended in the lake, taking both men and beasts to a watery grave. The Battle of the Gullet, where the sea burned and a prince died. The fall of King's Landing, where Rhaenyra finally took her father's throne, only to find it a cage. Each victory was hollow, each death a fracture in the fragile world Aegon had built. The small folk, caught between warring dragons, began to curse the very name of Targaryen. The prophecy of a unified realm was drowned out by the screams of the burning. And then there was the most catastrophic cost of all, the dragons. Aegon the Conqueror's dream did not just depend on a unified throne, it depended on the dragons. They were the ultimate weapon, the living flame that could hold back the darkness. But in the dance of the dragons, dragon fought dragon. They died by the dozens. In the dragon pit, a rioting mob of common folk, embittered by the war their rulers had dragged them into, tore the remaining dragons of King's Landing limb from limb. The bond between Targaryen and dragon, a bond that stretched back to the height of Valyria, was severed by fire and blood and madness. The dragons did not simply fade away. They were hunted, they were killed, and they were lost. With them died the realm's primary defense against the coming cold. The very threat Aegon's dream was meant to prepare them for was now infinitely more dangerous, because the war his dream had helped to spark had taken away the only weapon that could truly stop it. So hear the terrible irony of prophecy. Rhaenyra believed she was fulfilling a destiny to save humanity, but her grasp on that destiny helped destroy the very weapons needed to save it. She saw herself as the hero of the Song of Ice and Fire, but she became a tragic figure whose reign was measured in days, and whose legacy was one of fire, betrayal, and loss. Rhaenyra's end was as bitter as the war itself. Her own half-brother fed her to his dragon while her son watched. The woman who believed she was destined to save the world was consumed by fire, just one more casualty of a war fought over her father's throne. The prophecy did not save her. It did not save her children. It did not save the dragons, and it did not save the realm. The Targaryen dynasty survived, but it was a broken thing. The dragons were gone, their bones left to litter the dragon pit like monuments to folly. The great houses of Westeros had seen their rulers tear themselves apart. The memory of Aegon's dream, the Song of Ice and Fire, became a bitter joke to some. Others clung to it as the only truth left. It was passed down, a ghost at the Feast of Succession, a secret burden carried by kings who lacked the power to fulfill it. The weight of that dream would eventually settle on a Targaryen, born in the shadow of a dying dynasty, a prince who would become a Maester, giving up his name but not his blood, a king who would become mad, seeing visions in wildfire, and finally, a queen born on Dragonstone, in the middle of a storm, carrying the legacy of a broken house and the hope of a forgotten prophecy. The chain of succession, the pillar upon which Aegon's dream of a united realm stood, shattered with the passing of King Viserys I. The sudden scramble for the throne broke the sacred pact between the crown and the prophecy. In the Green Council, the Conqueror's vision was not just ignored, it was severed. The Greens seized the throne without knowing its purpose. The Song of Ice and Fire was a foreign tongue to them, a language of duty that ambition could not translate. The secret of Aegon's dream was lost to them in the very moment of their victory, buried under the weight of their usurpation. Rhaenyra, isolated on Dragonstone, carried the burden of the vision alone. She tried desperately to communicate its gravity. Before her fate overtook her, she spoke to her son Jacaerys of the Long Night, of the Dagger's secret inscription, of the war that truly mattered beyond the petty squabbles of men. She tried to make Daemon understand that the throne was merely a tool for a far greater purpose. But the drums of the dance were too loud. The war demanded blood, not poetry. Her sons heard a mother's fear, not a prophecy that spanned millennia. The urgency of the coming darkness was abstract against the immediate threat of swords and dragonfire. When Rhaenyra fell to her brother's vengeance on Dragonstone, the prophecy fell with her. It did not pass cleanly into the hands of her enemies. It went into the flames. It was swallowed by the fire of Sunfire. In her final moments, if she cried out the truth of Aegon's dream, the roar of the dragons consumed her words. The secret was silenced. But secrets born of dragon dreams do not simply die. They persist in fragments. Among the ruins of King's Landing, the whispers carried the memory in distorted forms. The Valyrian steel dagger, its inscription hidden, passed through unknowing hands. The legend of the prince that was promised mingled with the older story of Aegon's vision. The Song of Ice and Fire became a riddle, a ghost story whispered by maesters and fools. The true meaning was scattered. The Targaryens endured, their purpose dimmed, their greatest truth reduced to a rumour. The lost prophecy of the dance waited in the shadows of memory. A shattered mirror, holding fragments of a warning that the world had forgotten. With the passing of the dragons, the magic that bound the Targaryens to their ancient homeland and their prophetic visions began to wither. Aegon III, known as the Dragonbane, sat upon a throne of cold iron, ruling over a realm scarred by the fires of his family's civil war. To him, the dragons were not protectors against a northern darkness. They were the monsters that had devoured his mother before his very eyes. Under his sombre reign, the last of the great beasts grew sick, deformed and died, leaving behind only petrified eggs and a lingering sense of loss. The connection between the blood of the dragon and the Song of Ice and Fire was severed, perhaps forever. Generation after generation, the Targaryen kings ruled in ignorance of the great threat. They faced rebellions, plagues and internal strife, fighting for the Iron Throne as if it were the ultimate prize. Rather than a seat of vigil, the Valyrian steel dagger, bearing the secret message of the conqueror, was passed down from king to king, yet none knew how to read the runes in the fire. It became a mere relic, a ceremonial blade worn by monarchs who had forgotten the true enemy. It was not until nearly 2 centuries later that a young prince named Rhaegar Targaryen would stumble upon the faded remnants of the dream. Rhaegar, a bookish boy who preferred the company of harps to swords, read something in his scrolls that changed him utterly. We do not know exactly what he found, but we know it convinced him that he must become a warrior, and that his bloodline must produce the prince that was promised. He sought to piece together the shattered mirror, to rebuild the prophecy from the dust of history, but without the complete knowledge that Rhaenyra had tried to pass down. Rhaegar's pursuit of the dream was flawed. His actions, driven by a desperate desire to fulfill a prophecy he only half understood, sparked a new war that would finally bring down the Targaryen dynasty. When Robert's rebellion swept the realm, the last Targaryens were exiled, and the secret of Aegon's dream seemed lost to the world entirely. Yet the Song of Ice and Fire is not so easily silenced. Even when the singers are gone, the melody remains. In the frozen wastes of the far north, the ancient threat stirred once more, just as Aegon had foreseen 300 years prior. And in the east, a young exile named Daenerys hatched 3 dragons from stone, bringing magic back to a world that had grown cold and skeptical. The tragedy of the Dance of the Dragons was not just the death of the beasts or the fall of a house. It was the loss of a collective purpose. When the Greens and the Blacks tore the realm apart, they did not just fight for a crown. They fought for the right to guard the dawn. In their blindness, they threw away the map to the future. Yet, despite the centuries of ignorance, the blood of the dragon survived, and with it, the quiet, persistent promise that, when the long night came, the realm would stand together, even if they had forgotten the name of the king who had dreamed it first. When Viserys I died, the secret of Aegon's dream passed to Rhaenyra, and then it was shattered by war. The usurpers who took the throne had little knowledge of the prophecy, or perhaps they simply dismissed it. They fought for a crown, not a song. But the dragons did not care for their politics. The dragons died, and by the time the conflict was over, the realm was ruled by a child who had witnessed horrors that would define an entire reign. That child was Aegon III, the Dragonbane. Aegon III's reign is defined by the death of the last physical dragons. The great beasts that had made the Targaryens gods among men sickened, dwindled, and vanished from the world during his time on the Iron Throne. The last of them, a stunted creature known simply as the Last Dragon, perished in the year 153 after the conquest. But this extinction was not just a political catastrophe, it was a deeply personal wound. Aegon the Younger had been forced to witness his own mother, Rhaenyra, devoured by a dragon. He was kept as a hostage, a prisoner in his own family's court, forced to smile while his mother's killers sat the throne he was expected to inherit. When he finally wore the crown, he was hollow. He could not bear the sight of the creatures. He would not speak of them. The king, who was supposed to embody the fire of the Targaryen dynasty, was instead a monument to its trauma. And yet the realm could not let the magic go. Without dragons, the Iron Throne was just a chair surrounded by squabbling lords. The king's council, the great lords, the maesters of the citadel, all began a frantic, desperate search. They delved into ancient Valyrian scrolls. They performed rituals under the stars. They brought fossilized dragon eggs to forges and to funeral pyres. They tried to coax a spark of life from cold stone, but the secret was gone. The words of binding, the songs of waking were lost. The knowledge of the Valyrian dragon lords had died with their empire, and the last echo of that knowledge had just died with the dragons themselves. This failure to rekindle the fire forced a quiet, terrifying realization within the remnants of the court. Without dragons, the Targaryen dynasty was fundamentally ill-prepared for the prophesied winter. The entire purpose of the conquest, the secret dream of Aegon I, had been to unite the realm against a great darkness from the north. The dragons were the weapon, the unity was the shield, but the weapon was gone. The shield was shattered by civil war. The Song of Ice and Fire had become a dirge. The Targaryens sat the Iron Throne, but they could no longer fulfill the very reason they had conquered Westeros in the first place. Aegon III's reign is one of the longest in the dynasty's history, but is a history of stagnation and grief. The line was broken, the magic was fading, the Targaryen fire had dimmed to a flicker, and yet the blood of the dragon is tenacious. Even in the ashes of their greatest failure, seeds remained. The dream of the winter was not entirely dead. It was dormant, sleeping in the veins of the king's children, waiting for a prince that was promised, and a fire that could one day be reborn. With the passing of the Dragonbane, the crown fell to his eldest son, Daeron I, who became known to history as the Young Dragon. Daeron was only 14 when he ascended the Iron Throne, but he possessed a fierce, burning ambition that defied his youth. He looked at a map of Westeros and saw a glaring omission: Dawn. The Martells had never been conquered by Aegon I, and Daeron believed that if he could not rule with the terror of dragons, he would rule through the sheer force of military genius. He believed that completing the conquest would finally unite the realm as his ancestors had intended. He succeeded briefly, bringing dawn into the realm at the cost of tens of thousands of lives, only to lose it all and his own life in a bloody rebellion. The Young Dragon's conquest was a desperate attempt to prove that the Targaryens were still masters of the continent, even without their winged beasts. But his death at only 18 years of age proved that steel alone could not hold what dragonfire once forged. The crown then passed to his brother, Baelor the Blessed. Where Daeron sought glory in blood, Baelor sought it in prayer. He was a Septon king, a man who walked barefoot to dawn to forge a peace, and who locked his own sisters in the Maidenville to keep his court free from temptation. Baelor did not look to Valyrian scrolls to hatch dragon eggs. He prayed over them. He believed that the Seven would grant the Targaryens their dragons once more, if only they were pious enough. For 90 days he prayed over a clutch of eggs, fasting until he collapsed. But the stone remained stone. Baelor's reign showed a different kind of desperation, a retreat into religious fanaticism as a substitute for the magical power that had once made his family feel like gods. It was Aegon III's brother, Viserys II, who actually kept the realm together during these turbulent years, serving as Hand of the King before his own brief reign. But the rot had set in. The loss of the dragons had changed the fundamental nature of Targaryen rule. They were no longer untouchable. They were just men and women, susceptible to the same greed, jealousy, and weakness as any other noble house. This vulnerability exploded during the reign of Aegon IV. Remembered as the unworthy, he squandered the crown's wealth, fathered countless bastards, and on his deathbed, legitimized them all. This act of spite set the stage for the Blackfyre rebellions, a series of devastating civil wars that would tear the realm apart for generations. The dream of Aegon the Conqueror, the secret of the long winter, was buried deeper and deeper beneath layers of political strife, familial hatred, and lost knowledge. Yet the prophecy did not die. It lived on in whispers, in the obsessive searches of later kings like Aegon V, who would eventually perish at Summerhall in another catastrophic attempt to bring dragons back to life. The tragedy of the post-dragon Targaryens was their inability to let go of the past. They were haunted by the ghosts of their dragons, forever trying to recreate a magic they no longer understood. While the true threat in the north continued its slow, silent march toward the realms of men. The death of the last physical dragons under Aegon, the Dragonbane, did not, of course, extinguish the dragon dreams that haunted the Targaryen bloodline. If anything, the trauma of the dance of the dragons and the slaughter of the beasts seemed to embed the prophecy even deeper into their consciousness. In the generations that followed, the nature of these dreams began to shift in tone. The great sweeping visions of destiny and continental salvation that had driven Aenar the Exile, Aegon the Conqueror, and Rhaenyra became rarer. In their place came visions that were far more personal, fragmented, and often far more terrifying for those forced to witness them. This brings us squarely to the tragic figure of Prince Daeron Targaryen. History knows him by the cruel but fitting moniker of Daeron the Drunken. A younger son of Prince Maester, Daeron was born into a sprawling and deeply divided Targaryen dynasty, but he was distinguished from his kin by one peculiar and devastating curse. Daeron was a dragon dreamer. He experienced visions so vivid and so uncontrollable that they ruled his every waking thought. But unlike Daenys the dreamer, whose prophetic gift had saved the entire house from the doom, or Aegon the Conqueror, whose dream had forged an entire kingdom, Daeron's dreams brought him nothing but misery. He did not want this gift. He rejected it absolutely. Daeron spent his days and nights trying to drown the visions in wine, desperately trying to silence the whispers of prophecy through a haze of drink. He was trying to escape the very blood that ran in his veins. Yet the dreams came regardless, unbidden and utterly ignored. One of the most infamous of these visions involved a great red dragon. In the dream, Daeron watched as this magnificent beast of crimson scales fell from the sky, dead before it hit the ground, and crashed directly on top of a humble hedge knight. The imagery was stark. It was symbolic. To Daeron, it was simply a terrifying and apparently meaningless nightmare. He tried to push it away, to bury it under another bottle of Arbor Gold, but the truth was waiting for him at the Ashford tourney in the year 209. The tourney was a grand affair held to celebrate the marriage of Lord Ashford's daughter, Prince Baelor Targaryen, the beloved heir to the Iron Throne known throughout the realm as Baelor Breakspear, chose to enter the lists riding under the banner of a red dragon. During the final day of the Great Melee, Baelor found himself in a deadly trial of 7 against Sir Duncan the Tall, a humble hedge knight from the streets of Flea Bottom. In the crushing heat of the day, the strain of combat proved too much. Baelor Breakspear fell from his horse. It is said that his helm was famously crested, and the force of his fall cracked his skull. The crown prince of the 7 kingdoms was dead. The great red dragon had fallen. The hedge knight stood over it. Daeron the Drunken's symbolic dream had been brutally, literally fulfilled. The prophecy he had tried so desperately to drown in wine had come to pass in the most tragic way imaginable. The future he had been shown was unavoidable. Daeron's story proves a dark and powerful truth about the Targaryen connection to prophecy. Dragon dreams are not a choice. You cannot outrun them. You cannot drink them away. You cannot reject the prophecy simply because you dislike the shape it takes. The dreamer is merely a vessel for the song of ice and fire. The vision of the red dragon falling on the hedge knight was not a warning Daeron could heed. It was an inevitability he was cursed to witness. Daeron did everything in his power to resist his gift, and it made absolutely no difference. The dream came true regardless of his desire. This unpredictable, symbolic nature of dragon dreams is what makes them so profoundly dangerous. They do not arrive with a clear instruction manual or a warning label. They are riddles written in fire and blood, often given full meaning only in the moment of their fulfillment. The tragedy of Daeron, the Drunken, demonstrates that the dream is never truly in control of the vision. They are simply the one forced to look. This helplessness before the prophecy, this burden of seeing what is to come without the power to stop it, would continue to haunt the Targaryen line. And as the dynasty moved deeper into its later years, the failure to properly understand these symbolic dreams would lead to catastrophes far greater than a single life lost in a tourney. Daeron the Drunken saw a red dragon fall upon a hedge knight, a vision that lingered in the air like smoke from a dying fire. But even as that dream faded, another Targaryen dream was stirring, one that would come to define the ambitions of a rival branch of the royal family. This dream belonged to Daemon II Blackfyre, a pretender to the Iron Throne, whose name echoed with the weight of prophecy and rebellion. Daemon II was no stranger to the prophetic traditions of his blood. The Blackfyres, though born from a bastard line, carried the same dragon dreams as their Targaryen cousins. And for Daemon, one dream stood out above all others. He saw a dragon hatching from a stone egg at White Walls, the seat of the Blackfyre loyalists. In his vision, the egg cracked open, and from it emerged a living dragon, a symbol of rebirth and power. Daemon believed this dream was a divine sign that he was destined to restore the Blackfyre dynasty to the Iron Throne. But dreams in Westeros are not always what they seem. The meaning of Daemon's vision was quickly twisted by those around him. Political manipulators saw an opportunity to exploit the dream for their own ends. They whispered that the dragon egg represented Daemon himself, that he was the promised dragon who would hatch a new era of Blackfyre rule. And so, the Second Blackfyre Rebellion was born from the embers of a prophetic vision, a war fought not for justice or claim, but for the interpretation of a dream. The rebellion, however, ended in disaster. Daemon II was captured, and the Blackfyre cause crumbled. But the bitter twist came later, when the true meaning of his dream was revealed. The dragon that hatched from the stone egg was not Daemon II, nor any Blackfyre. It was Aegon V Targaryen, the prince known as Egg, a boy of unassuming birth who would rise to become king. Aegon was the genuine article, a Targaryen with the blood of dragons, and his rise represented everything Daemon's dream had foretold, but not in the way anyone expected. This is the dangerous lesson of prophecy in the world of ice and fire. A vision can be true, but it can also be misread, warped by ambition into a tool of destruction. Daemon II's dream was not false. It was simply misunderstood. The stone egg at White Walls did hatch a dragon, but it was a dragon that belonged to the true line, not the pretenders. The political ambition that surrounded the dream turned it into a weapon, and in the end, it was the Blackfyres who were burned. And so, the echoes of Daemon's vision ripple through history, reminding us that prophecies are like glass candles. They can illuminate the truth, or they can cast shadows that lead us astray. This was not the last dragon dream to be misinterpreted. The Targaryen line would continue to produce visions, each one carrying the weight of expectation and error as the house itself marched toward its final days. Egg, the very boy who had unwittingly fulfilled Daemon's dream at White Walls, would grow up to be consumed by his own desperate longing for the return of dragons. As king, Aegon V faced a fractured realm and a rebellious nobility. He believed that only real living dragons could give him the power to enforce his reforms and protect the small folk. This belief led him to the tragedy of Summerhall, a fateful night in the year 259 after Aegon's conquest. The king gathered his closest family and friends at his pleasure palace. They brought 7 dragon eggs, hoping to hatch them using wildfire, sorcery, and prayers. But the dream of fire and blood turned into a nightmare of ash and grief. The palace burned to the ground, claiming the lives of King Aegon, his eldest son Duncan the Small, and the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Duncan the Tall. The very prophecies that promised rebirth instead delivered a fiery grave, proving once more that the pursuit of dragon dreams often leads to ruin. Decades later, the embers of Summerhall would still cast a shadow over the mind of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Born on the very day of that tragedy, Rhaegar was a melancholy youth, deeply invested in ancient texts and prophecies. One day, he found something in his scrolls that changed him forever. He decided he must become a warrior, believing himself to be the prince that was promised, a savior destined to save humanity from a great darkness. But as the years passed, Rhaegar's understanding of the prophecy shifted. He came to believe that the savior was not himself, but his son. He spoke of the dragon having 3 heads, a vision of 3 children who would together save the world. This obsession drove him to run away with Lyanna Stark, a choice that ignited Robert's rebellion. Rhaegar's pursuit of a prophetic savior did not bring salvation. It brought the end of the Targaryen dynasty. From Daeron the Drunken's warning of a red dragon falling, to Daemon II's a stone egg, to the tragedy of Summerhall and Rhaegar's fateful choices. The history of House Targaryen is a tragic tapestry woven with the threads of misunderstood visions. They believed their dragon blood made them masters of the future, but in the end, they were merely puppets of fate, marching blindly into the flames of their own making. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The failed rebellion at White Walls showed how fragile the dream of a restored dragon really was. Daemon II saw a dragon hatch from a stone egg, and he believed he was that dragon. But the prophecy shattered when his rebellion was drowned in sand, blood, and mead. The dream of the dragon lived on, searching for a vessel truly worthy of its fire. It found one in King Aegon V. Aegon V was a king who loved the small folk. He had walked among them as a boy, squiring for Sir Duncan the Tall, and he never forgot their suffering. When he took the throne, he became a reformer, passing laws to protect the common people from the tyranny of the lords. But he knew his power was incomplete. The Targaryen dynasty had been bleeding legitimacy since the Dance of the Dragons. Without dragons, the Iron Throne was just a chair, and so Aegon turned to prophecy. He studied the ancient texts of Valyria, searching for the secrets of dragon hatching. He believed the conqueror's dream of the long night was a sacred warning, a duty that could only be fulfilled with fire made flesh. He grew increasingly obsessed. He was convinced that the fate of the realm and the survival of his people depended on restoring the dragons. The lords would never truly fear the throne again until the Targaryens commanded the sky, and the small folk would never be safe from the ambitions of the powerful unless the king had the ultimate weapon to enforce the peace. In the year 259 after the conquest, he gathered his family at the summer palace of Summerhall. It was a beautiful place, built for joy and laughter by Daeron I. But on this day it was transformed into a forge. His heir, Prince Duncan the Small, was there, disinherited for love, accompanied by his wife, Jenny of Oldstones, whose ties to the Wood's Witch and her prophecies only deepened the king's resolve. His second son, Prince Jaehaerys, was there with his heavily pregnant wife, Princess Rhaenyra. His third son, Prince Daeron, served as his Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Sir Duncan the Tall, the greatest knight of the age and the king's oldest friend, stood by his side. The entire royal family was present for a work of magic. They brought a clutch of 7 petrified dragon eggs. They brought jars of wildfire, the green fire of the alchemists that burned with a heat no natural flame could match. The ritual began. The fire was lit. The flames burned green and hungry. The eggs were placed at the heart of the blaze. The king believed that the fire must be hot enough to crack stone, that the blood of the dragon was the catalyst, but the fire found its own terrible purpose. It broke free. It raced through the halls of Summerhall. The green flame was everywhere. The heat was so intense that stone melted and ran like water. The screams of the dying were lost in the roar of the blaze. King Aegon V died in the inferno, consumed by the very fire he hoped would save his house. His son, Prince Daeron, the Lord Commander, died beside him, true to his vows to the last. Sir Duncan the Tall, the greatest knight of his age, perished trying to reach the king, his white cloak blackened by ash. Summerhall became a tomb of emerald flame and melted stone. But in the midst of the apocalypse, a strange mercy. In a tent on the palace grounds, far from the main blaze, Princess Rhaenyra was in labour. The ash fell like black snow. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and death. And in that darkness, a new life came into the world. A boy. They named him Rhaegar. He was born amidst the smoke and grief of the tragedy, forever linking him to Summerhall. He was the prince born in salt and smoke, the living echo of a prophecy that had just consumed his grandfather. The tragedy of Summerhall scarred the Targaryen line forever. The hope of restoring dragons ended in ash. But the prophecy did not die. It simply found a new vessel. In the boy born in the smoke, Rhaegar grew up in the shadow of that day, a melancholy scholar who believed he was the prince that was promised. He studied the song of ice and fire, trying to understand the tragedy that preceded him. He knew that prophecy could be a trap, that trying to force the hand of fate could destroy everything you loved, but he could not escape the flame. The dream of the dragon did not die at Summerhall. It simply found a new voice, a new heart, and a new tragedy waiting to be written. The tragedy of Summerhall was not just the funeral of a king's dream. In the midst of the catastrophe, or perhaps in the immediate, smoke-choked aftermath, Rhaenyra Targaryen gave birth to her first son. They named him Rhaegar. It feels almost mythic, does it not? The prince born in a place of fiery failure, a child of prophecy from the very first breath. Rhaegar grew up in the shadow of that fire. He was not a warrior by nature. Those who knew him as a child called him clever, but melancholic. He loved to read, to write, to play the harp. His songs were sad, full of longing, and he was drawn again and again to the ruins of Summerhall. He would walk there for hours, running his hands over the scorched stones. He was looking for answers. He was convinced that the tragedy, the fire, the death of his great-grandfather's ambition was not an accident. It was a sign. It was a door left open, waiting for him to walk through. And then he found the key, a text, an ancient scroll, or perhaps a series of them, that spoke of an old prophecy, the prince that was promised. The scrolls were very explicit. The prince would be born of the line of Aerys and Rhaenyra. He would bring the dawn. He would draw Lightbringer from the flames. But he had to be a warrior. Rhaegar read these words, and the gentle boy who loved only his harp felt the structure of his life collapse. He had to change. He had to become the warrior the prophecy demanded. So he did. He put down his books. He picked up a sword, and in a remarkably short time, Quiet Prince became one of the finest knights of his age. He trained until his hands bled, driven not by ambition for a crown, but by the crushing weight of a destiny he felt only he could see. For years, Rhaegar believed unequivocally that he himself was the prince that was promised. He confided in Maester Aemon. He looked at the stars, at the comet, and saw confirmation. He was born in the fire of Summerhall. He had the blood of the dragon. The story was his. But the deeper Rhaegar read, the more the ancient words troubled him. The prophecy did not speak of the present. It spoke of a song yet to be sung, a song of ice and fire. It spoke of a bleeding star, of salt and smoke. None of these things pointed directly at Rhaegar. Rhaegar realized the ultimate truth of his life. He was not the prince that was promised. He was the father of the prince that was promised. The savior could not be him. The savior had to be his child, a child born of his bloodline, joined with another. This single revelation shattered and remade Rhaegar Targaryen. He was no longer the hero of the story. He was the prologue. His entire purpose shifted from wielding a sword to creating a vessel, he needed a woman. He needed a mother for the promised prince. This is what led him away from Elia Martell, away from his own children, and towards the young she-wolf of Winterfell. It was not simple love that drove him. It was the cold, terrifying logic of a prophecy he could not ignore. He saw in Lyanna Stark the ice to his fire. He saw the completion of the song, the war that was fought for this union. The rebellion that toppled House Targaryen was a war born from a prophecy misread for generations. The child of Rhaegar and Lyanna, hidden in the snows of the north, became the keeper of this impossible burden. But the prophecy did not end in the Tower of Joy. Dragon dreams are not bound by death or conquest. They travel through the bloodline. They survive the fall of empires. They cross the narrow sea, and they whisper, patiently, waiting for the world to be ready to listen again for an awakening. Across the water, in the red waste deserts and the ancient cities of Essos, another child of Aerys and Rhaenyra was carrying the embers of that same forgotten fire, Daenerys Stormborn. She was born in exile, amidst a howling tempest that seemed to mourn the death of her dynasty. Like Rhaegar, she was a creature of destiny, though she did not have the scrolls of ancient scholars to guide her. She had only her blood, her dreams, and 3 petrified stones. When Daenerys stepped into the funeral pyre of Khal Drogo, she was not merely committing an act of grief, she was reenacting the very ritual that had consumed her family at Summerhall. But where Aegon V had failed, where the tragedy of Summerhall had left only ashes and sorrow, Daenerys succeeded. The magic that had slept since the death of the last dragons woke with a roar. Out of the smoke and salt of her tears, the dragons returned to the world. The song of ice and fire was no longer a silent melody hummed in the ruins of a collapsed palace. It was a living, breathing reality. And so the 2 threads of Rhaegar's legacy began to weave together. In the frozen north, the son of ice and fire grew up as a bastard, a boy with no name and no crown, yet carrying the blood of old Valyria and the quiet strength of the first men. In the east, the mother of dragons gathered her armies, her path illuminated by the red comet that Rhaegar had once stared at from his balcony in King's Landing. They were the 2 halves of a broken world drawn together by a destiny written in the stars long before they were born. The tragedy of Summerhall was not the end of the Targaryen dynasty. It was the crucible. It was the terrible, bloody price that had to be paid so that the world could be saved from the long night. For in the end, the prophecy was never about a single hero or a single crown. It was about the balance, the fire that burns away the cold and the ice that preserves the memory of the world. And as the winds of winter begin to blow, the song of ice and fire plays on, waiting for its final, devastating chord. The dragon must have 3 heads. Those words haunted Rhaegar Targaryen long after he first read them in an ancient scroll. It was a riddle, a prophecy, and a personal requirement all at once. For Rhaegar, it became the defining obsession of his life. He emerged from his long seclusion at Summerhall, convinced not just that he was the prince that was promised, but that the prince could not stand alone. The prophecy required 2 more. The dragon must have 3 heads. It was a concept as old as Valyria itself. The Targaryen sigil, a 3-headed dragon, was not just an emblem. It was a promise of unity, of balance. Aegon the Conqueror conquered with his 2 sisters. The faith of the 7 mirrors the triune god, and in the prophecy of the prince that was promised, Rhaegar found a requirement he could not ignore. 1 hero was not enough. The promised prince would need 2 other heads of the dragon to defeat the coming darkness. Rhaegar did what a prince does. He sought a political match that could strengthen the dynasty, but he also sought a wife who could give him the 3 heads he needed. He found that in Elia Martell of Dawn, in the year 280 after the conquest, Rhaegar and Elia were married. It was a union of sun and dragon, of dawn and the Iron Throne, and soon Elia was with child. Their first child was a daughter. They named her Rhaenys, after the warrior queen. The birth was hard, but the child was healthy. Rhaegar looked at his daughter, the first head of the dragon. Some whispered he was disappointed she was not a son, but he doted on her fiercely. She was the beginning of the trio. Their second child was a son, born in the final days of 282 after the conquest. A comet blazed across the sky above King's Landing, a red sword of flame that many proclaimed was a sign of the prince that was promised. Rhaegar took it as absolute confirmation. He named the boy Aegon, the second head, and whispered to Elia words that would echo through history. He is the prince that was promised, and his is the song of ice and fire. But there, in the aftermath of that same birth, was the breaking of the prophecy. Elia Martell had suffered terribly giving birth to Aegon. Her body was broken. The Maesters delivered the devastating truth. Rhaegar did not want to hear. She could not bear another child. The third head of the dragon could never come from this marriage. Rhaegar was trapped. He loved Elia, but the prophecy demanded completion. The long night was coming. The prince that was promised needed his two companions. The dragon needed 3 heads. He could not fail. He began to search. He looked at the great houses. He returned to his dusty books and scrolls, looking for a clue. The dragon must have 3 heads. One was a Martell of dawn, fire and sun. One was a Targaryen, fire and blood. The third required something else. Something cold. Something northern. His search took him to the tourney at Harrenhal. It is said that in the eyes of a she-wolf of Winterfell, fierce and wild, with a certain melancholy in her gaze, Rhaegar believed he found the final piece. A stark contrast to the Son of Dawn. He convinced himself this was the will of the gods, a necessary act to fulfill a cosmic duty. He crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty, and in that single gesture, he set in motion a chain of events that would tear the realm apart. Rhaegar believed the 3 heads were the key to saving the world from the long night, but in his desperate pursuit of that vision, he created a winter far more immediate. The songs of the prince that was promised were drowned out by the roar of rebellion. The dragon had found itself facing the wolf. The spark struck at Harrenhal quickly grew into a raging wildfire. When Lyanna vanished with the crown prince, the North demanded justice, and the Mad King responded with fire and blood. The fragile peace of the realm shattered completely. Robert Baratheon, fueled by fury and a stolen bride, rallied the Stormlands, the North, the Vale and the Riverlands under a single banner of rebellion. Rhaegar, meanwhile, remained secluded in the south, isolated in the Red Mountains of Dawn at the Tower of Joy, believing perhaps that his grand design was finally complete. He had his 3rd head of the dragon growing in Lyanna's womb, a union of ice and fire, but the price of his prophecy was paid in the blood of thousands. When the prince finally returned to King's Landing to lead his father's armies, the war had already reached its tipping point. On the banks of the Green Fork of the Trident, the dragon met the stag. Rhaegar fought with the conviction of a man who believed he was destined to save the world. But destiny proved indifferent to his songs. Robert's warhammer shattered Rhaegar's breastplate, scattering rubies like drops of blood into the rushing waters. With his dying breath, the prince whispered a woman's name, leaving his prophecy unfinished and his family defenseless. The tragedy of Rhaegar Targaryen was that in his desperate quest to birth the 3 heroes who would save humanity from the cold, he brought about the ruin of his own dynasty. The 3 heads he so desperately sought were scattered to the winds of fate, leaving a broken realm to face the dark alone. Rhaegar Targaryen was a man possessed, not by madness but by belief. He had read the prophecies of old Valyria. He believed his son Aegon was the prince that was promised. He believed the dragon must have 3 heads. This belief consumed him. It led him away from his family, away from his duty, and directly into the story we are telling now. His journey began at the tourney of Harrenhal. It was a grand gathering of the realm, a celebration of chivalry in a year of false spring. Lyanna Stark was there. She was a she-wolf, a rider of horses, a woman of the north. She was promised to Robert Baratheon, but her heart belonged to the wild. A mystery knight appeared at the tournament, a figure called the Knight of the Laughing Tree. This knight fought for the honour of a wronged man and then vanished. Rhaegar was sent by the king to unmask this night. He found Lyanna. At the closing feast, Rhaegar did the unthinkable. He crowned Lyanna Stark, the Queen of Love and Beauty. He placed a crown of blue winter roses in her lap. The realm gasped. It was a public declaration. It was the fateful meeting of two souls drawn together by an ancient song. That night, the secret elopement began. Rhaegar and Lyanna vanished south. They were married in secret, a union blessed by the old gods and the new. It was the literal merging of fire and ice. A Targaryen prince and a Stark of Winterfell. They joined their blood to fulfill a prophecy, to produce a child of destiny. The elopement was a catastrophe. Lyanna's brother Brandon Stark reacted with fury. He rode to King's Landing and demanded Rhaegar come out and die. The Mad King arrested him, summoned their father, and burned them both alive. The realm was plunged into war. Robert Baratheon raised his banners. Eddard Stark demanded justice. The downfall of the Targaryen dynasty had begun. Rhaegar left Lyanna in the Tower of Joy. High in the red mountains of Dawn, he went to face the rebels. He met Robert Baratheon on the banks of the Trident. The river ran red with blood. Rhaegar fought bravely, but he was struck down. He died believing, until his last breath, that his children would save the world. He whispered her name. He trusted the prophecy. In the Tower of Joy, Lyanna gave birth. She died in the labour, but she made her brother Eddard promise to protect her child. The child was a boy, a son of fire and ice. Eddard Stark took the boy, hiding his true parentage. He raised him as a bastard in the north, a secret prince waiting for the world that needed him. Rhaegar was gone. The dynasty was broken. The last Targaryens fled across the narrow sea. The child of destiny grew up in the snow, unaware of the burden he carried. The prophecies that had guided and doomed Rhaegar did not die with him. They waited. They slept. And in exile across the sea, a Targaryen girl began to dream of fire. This girl was Daenerys, the Stormborn princess, carrying the blood of old Valyria in her veins. Alongside her brother Viserys, she wandered the free cities, beggars in a world that had once belonged to their ancestors. They fled from assassins, selling their mother's crown just to buy bread, always looking over their shoulders. Viserys grew bitter, consumed by a desperate desire to reclaim the Iron Throne, while Daenerys remained quiet, a gentle soul shaped by fear and exile. Yet beneath her meek exterior, her power was waking. Her brother saw her only as a pawn, a prize to be traded to a powerful Dothraki warlord in exchange for an army. He sold her to Khal Drogo for 10,000 screamsons, believing this would buy him his crown. But the wedding gift she received would change the course of history. 3 petrified dragon eggs, cold and lifeless as stone, were placed in her hands. To anyone else, they were mere relics of a dead age. To Daenerys, they felt warm. They whispered to her in her dreams, singing of a fire that could not be quenched. As she marched across the vast red waste, she began to find her own strength. She ceased to be a frightened girl and became a queen. When her brother's madness finally consumed him, and when her husband was lost to betrayal and dark magic, Daenerys did not break. She stepped into the roaring flames of a funeral pyre, carrying the stone eggs with her. The world believed the dragons were gone forever, that the magic of the old world had died with the last Targaryen king. But as the ashes cleared, a miracle emerged. Daenerys stood unburnt, cradling 3 newly hatched dragons. The red waste echoed with their cries, a sound that had not been heard in over 150 years. The song of ice and fire was no longer a silent whisper in the north. It was a roaring flame in the east. While the secret son of Rhaegar and Lyanna grew up in the cold shadow of Winterfell, completely unaware of his royal blood, his aunt was building an empire across the narrow sea. 2 paths, born from the same broken dynasty, were destined to collide. Rhaegar's prophecy had not failed. It had simply split into 2 parallel journeys, one of ice hidden in the snow and one of fire rising from the ashes. Together, they would face the great darkness that was gathering beyond the wall, fulfilling a destiny written in the stars long before they were even born. But as the realm burned around him, Aerys II Targaryen saw none of this as the death of a dynasty. He saw it as the birth of something far greater. His paranoia had deepened in the years since Duskendale, hollowing out the man he had once been. By the time Robert Baratheon's banners marched south, the King of the Seven Kingdoms was fully convinced that fire was the only truth. He found a willing audience in the pyromancers of the alchemists, who fed his obsession with wildfire. For Aerys, it was not a mere weapon of war, it was a sacred tool, the substance of Valyria itself. He appointed Rossart, the Guild Master, as his hand, a man whose entire understanding of the world revolved around the green flames. In the king's mind, fire was the ultimate expression of Targaryen power, the blood of the dragon made manifest. It was in this state that Aerys formulated his grand delusion. He believed that by burning the entire city of King's Landing in a single apocalyptic act of green fire, he would not be deposed. He would be reborn. He would shed his mortal flesh and ascend as a true dragon. Hatching from the pyre of the capital, the wildfire caches he ordered, placed throughout the city, were not traps for his enemies. They were the components, a grand ritual. The ashes of King's Landing would be the shell from which he emerged, purified and reborn through the only magic he had ever truly trusted. The consuming, cleansing power of wildfire. The tragic irony is almost beyond measure. Aerys believed he was securing the magical future of his house by becoming a living god of fire. Instead, he ensured its political ruin. His own mad actions had driven his son and heir, Rhaegar, to his death at the Ruby Ford. His brutality against the Starks ignited the very war that now surrounded him. And in his final act, ordering the destruction of the capital, he gave his own Kingsguard no choice but to slay him to save the population. He destroyed every hope his son Rhaegar had pursued, every prophecy of unity and survival, in a single blazing delusion. When the Gold Cloaks brought news of the sack, and the Targaryen children were spirited from the Red Keep by the loyal Sir Willem Darry, the dynasty did not so much fall as fracture into scattered fragments. Viserys, barely into his boyhood, was now the king in exile for a realm that had no throne, and Daenerys, born amidst a terrible storm on Dragonstone, came into the world at the very moment the last embers of Targaryen rule were extinguished in Westeros. They carried nothing but the weight of their name, a handful of loyal retainers, and the fading echoes of prophecies they barely understood. They arrived in the free cities as supplicants, the beggar king and his sister, selling their mother's crown to buy passage from one wharf to another. But even in exile, the dragon dreams did not die. The ancient fire magic Aerys had corrupted and betrayed, still whispered in the blood of his children, waiting for a different spark to bring it back to life. For years, Viserys chased the phantom of a crown, his mind warping under the same strain of madness that had consumed his father. He saw himself as the dragon, demanding obedience and reverence, yet he possessed none of the fire, only the ash. He did not understand that the blood of the dragon was not merely a claim to a throne of swords, but a deep, terrifying connection to a magic older than the Seven Kingdoms themselves. It was Daenerys, quiet and overlooked, who carried the true spark, while her brothers screamed at the world for what had been stolen from them. She listened to the whispers of the past. When she was gifted 3 fossilized dragon eggs, stone cold and ancient, others saw them as mere wealth, relics of a dead age. But to Daenerys, they felt warm. They spoke to a part of her that had never felt at home in the world of men. The tragedy of House Targaryen had always been this division. The line between those who were consumed by the fire and those who could walk through it. Where Aerys sought to burn 1,000,000 innocent souls to force his own ascension, Daenerys would find her destiny through a different kind of sacrifice. In the Red Wastes, beside the funeral pyre of her husband, she would step into the flames, not out of madness, but out of a profound, instinctual surrender to her bloodline. As the fire consumed the wood, the flesh, and the witch who had betrayed her, the magic of old Valyria stirred from its long slumber. 3 cracks echoed across the Dothraki Sea, sounding like thunder in a cloudless sky. When the ashes cooled, the world changed forever. Daenerys rose from the embers, untouched by the heat, with 3 living dragons clinging to her body. The Mad King's dream had finally been realized, not through the slaughter of a city, but through the birth of a new mother of dragons. The dynasty had not ended in the ruins of King's Landing. It had simply waited, sleeping in the stone, until the true blood of the dragon was ready to wake it. Aerys II believed that wildfire would transform him into a dragon reborn, but his cousin, Aemon Targaryen, had already undergone a transformation of his own. Decades before the Mad King sat the throne, Aemon had removed himself from the iron citadel of his family, choosing instead the dark and silent halls of the Night's Watch. It was a self-imposed exile, driven not by punishment, but by a desire to escape the endless tragedies that seemed to follow his bloodline. He had watched his brother Aegon, the 5th, perish in the flames of Summerhall, had seen his nephew Duncan's love destroy the peace of the realm, and had concluded that the politics of his family were a poison he could no longer stomach. So he took to the wall, swore his vows, and became a maester in service to the brothers of the Night's Watch. He buried himself in the lore of the world, far from the Game of Thrones, but the game could not be escaped forever. Letters began to arrive from a young prince whose mind burned with questions. Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince, had discovered the ancient text that spoke of the prince that was promised, and he sought out Aemon, the oldest living member of his family, to help him decode the prophecies. They entered into a secret correspondence that would last for years. Aemon, despite his blindness and his age, offered what wisdom he could. He discussed the nature of dragon dreams, the signs of ice and fire, and the words of the ancient woods witch, who had foretold that the prince would be born of the line of Aerys and Rhaenyra. But Aemon also knew the danger of prophecy. He had seen how it could consume a man, how it could turn his eyes away from the present and fix them on a future that might never come. Living at the Wall, Aemon was perhaps the only Targaryen who understood the true nature of the threat they faced. The cold darkness that Aegon the Conqueror had dreamed of before his conquest was not merely a metaphor for political upheaval. It was a literal threat waking in the north. The others had been dormant for millennia, but now there were signs. The long summer was ending, the winds were growing colder, and the Brothers of the Watch reported increasingly frequent encounters with forces that could not be explained by mortal men. Aemon knew that the time of winter was upon them, and yet, as he sat in his cold chambers, he felt only a profound and heartbreaking sorrow. His family was too broken to face this challenge. Aerys was consumed by madness. Rhaegar was lost in the prophecy of his own making, and the realm was tearing itself apart in a civil war that would leave the Targaryens scattered and destroyed. There was no united dragon line, no single voice to rally the kingdoms against the coming night. Aemon was an old man, blind and frail, left to watch as his family repeated the same mistakes that had brought down so many great houses before them. The prophecy had been given to them, but they had failed to understand it, failed to prepare for it. In the end, all Aemon could do was wait. He waited for the fires of Targaryen ambition to burn out and for the cold to come. He knew that the Song of Ice and Fire was not a song of triumph, but a warning. And he had lived long enough to see the warning go unheeded. Prophecy is never a simple gift. It twists and turns in the hands of those who hold it, often leading to the very doom it seeks to avoid. And for the Targaryens, the dragon dreams that had once saved them would become the shadows that consumed them. When word finally reached the wall of the sack of King's Landing and the brutal deaths of Rhaegar and his children, Aemon did not weep aloud. His grief was a silent, freezing thing, heavier than the ice of the wall itself. He believed himself to be the last dragon, a blind sentinel guarding a realm that had forgotten his family's name. Yet the wheel of fate had one final turn for the old Maester. Years later, a young bastard boy named Jon Snow would arrive at Castle Black, bearing the solemn face of the North, but carrying a destiny that Aemon could only sense in the quietest corners of his mind. And soon after, Whispers drifted across the narrow sea of 3 dragons hatched in the red wastes, born from the funeral pyre of Daenerys Targaryen. For the first time in 80 years, Aemon felt the warmth of hope, a fragile flame against the gathering dark. He realised that the prophecy had not died on the Trident with Rhaegar. It had simply shifted, migrating to a young girl in the east. And perhaps, though he could not know for certain, to the very boy who stood before him in the black cloak of the Watch. When the time came for Aemon to leave the wall, to seek out this young dragon queen, his ancient body began to fail him. On the damp planks of a ship bound for Old Town, his mind drifted back to his youth, to the summer gardens of King's Landing, and to the brothers he had loved and lost. In his final fevered moments, the blindness lifted from his spirit. He understood at last that the dragon must have 3 heads, and that his own part in the great song was finally at an end. He died at sea, 102 years old, his body preserved in a cask of black rum, a dark end for a man who had lived his life in the shadows of the world's edge. But his wisdom remained, whispered into the ear of Samwell Tarly. A spark of fire passed on to light the way through the long night that was surely to come. Maester Aemon spent his final days at the wall, his fading eyesight matched only by the clarity of his visions of a world that had long since forgotten him. He knew, through the long years of his exile, that the dragon must have 3 heads. He had outlived his brother King Aegon V, his nephews and nieces, and the entire tragedy of Summerhall. He had heard the news of Rhaegar's death at the Ruby Ford, and the fall of King's Landing to the forces of Robert Baratheon. By the time the wildlings brought word of a Targaryen princess across the narrow sea, Aemon was blind, ancient, and utterly alone with his burden of knowledge. He whispered that Daenerys was the one, that the prince that was promised was born again in smoke and salt. He passed that knowledge to Samwell Tarly, a secret he had carried his entire life. But Aemon died before he could ever witness her, his prophecy unanswered, his bloodline reduced to a single girl sold to a Dothraki horse lord for the promise of an army. And that girl had no crown, no army, no throne, and no dragon. What she had, what defined her more than any title ever could, were the dreams that came to her in the dark. Daenerys Targaryen grew up haunted by ghosts she could not name. She remembered a house with a red door, a lemon tree outside her window in Braavos, the scent of salt and the sound of distant gulls. But was it Braavos? The older she grew, the more she realised that memory might not be a memory at all, but a wish, a projection of a home she had never truly possessed. She was a fugitive princess, a pawn in her brother's Game of Thrones. At night in the Dothraki Sea, sleeping beneath a canopy of unfamiliar stars, the true visions came. She saw great wings stretching across the sky, blotting out the sun. She saw a dragon made of scales that shimmered like molten copper, and she felt something inside herself twist and reach toward it, as if a chain of fire linked her soul to that ancient creature. And in these dreams, there was a destiny that terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure, a destiny far greater than anything her brother could imagine. Viserys spoke of conquest and vengeance, of golden crowns and legions of loyal men to slaughter his enemies. Daenerys dreamed of fire and power that did not need a crown. She felt, even in her deepest fear of her brother, that she was meant for something far larger, far older, and far more terrible than selling her body for an army of Dothraki screamers. At her wedding to Khal Drogo, she was given a gift that Viserys dismissed as a worthless trinket. Illyrio Merpatis placed in her hands 3 stone eggs, fossilized, ancient and lifeless to the eyes of the unblooded. They were jade and crimson and deep black, their scales shimmering under the torchlight as if they held a heartbeat far beneath the surface. Viserys laughed and called it a poor gift, a fraud. But the moment Daenerys touched them, her bones knew something her mind could not explain. She felt a warmth in the stone, an answering pulse that seemed to move in rhythm with her own blood. She kept them close, cradled them against her body, spoke to them in a language she did not know she knew. She laid them against her belly at night, trying to feed them her own heat, believing in some deep instinctive part of her soul that they were alive. It was not logic. It was the blood of the dragon, waking up after 100 years of sleep. But the path to fire is always paved in ash. Khal Drogo grew strong from his victories, but not invincible. A wound from an Arak festered, poisoning his strength. Daenerys, desperate and betrayed by the Maegi Miri Mazdur, made a terrible choice. The blood magic Miri performed saved Drogo's life in body, but killed everything that made him a man. He became a hollow thing, walking without will. And in the tent, in the midst of that dark ritual, Daenerys felt her son Rhaegar, the stallion who mounts the world, die inside her. The child was twisted, monstrous, a creature of dark magic. Her son, her husband, her Khalasar, she lost them all in a single night. There was nothing left but fire. Daenerys built the pyre herself, selecting the logs, the oils, the silks. She commanded the Dothraki to bind Khal Drogo's body and to place the 3 dragon eggs around him, encircling him in a nest of stone. Miri Mazdur was bound to the pyre, screaming curses in her native tongue. The surviving Dothraki watched in horror and awe. They called her a witch. They did not understand that she had already walked through the deepest darkness. Daenerys did not recite the ancient prophecy of the prince that was promised for the crowd, though the words thrummed in her blood. She did not explain the symmetry of sacrifice, the power of death to pay for life. She simply took the heavy torch, felt the heat on her face, and tossed it onto the pyre. The oil caught instantly, sending a column of fire into the night sky. And Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, the unburnt, walked into the flames. The heat should have consumed her. The fire should have made her ash. But Daenerys Targaryen was not ash. She was the fire, the blood of the dragon, the dream of her ancestors made flesh. When the flames finally died down, the Dothraki dropped to their knees in abject terror. She stood in the center of the burning wreckage, unburnt, naked, her skin untouched, and clinging to her arms, crying out to the world for the first time in over 150 years, were 3 living dragons. The stone had cracked open. The magic of old Valyria had returned to the world. The ancient dream of rebirth through fire and blood. The dream that had driven Aegon the Conqueror and Daenys the Dreamer had been fulfilled by an exiled girl sold across the narrow sea. The dragons were small, fragile, their wings still damp, their bellies hungry. But they were real. The prophecy that had haunted Aemon and Rhaegar, the warnings of Daenys the Dreamer that saved the bloodline from the doom. It all centered on this single impossible moment. A Targaryen alone in the world was no longer alone. She had 3 children made of fire. The dream of the Red Door, of a home, of a destiny, began to melt away and reform into something far more ambitious. She would not go back to Braavos. She would not look for a house with a lemon tree. The Dragon Queen had awakened. The song of ice and fire, the dream of Aegon the Conqueror, the saviour that Rhaegar died believing in. They now had a vessel, a mother, a queen. But the dreams did not stop. They only grew deeper, darker, and more demanding. Daenerys' connection to her dragons was immediate and primal, but her understanding of what they meant was still a distant echo, a feeling rather than a clear song. The 3 eggs were a promise, but the keys to unlocking that promise lay not in the Red Waste, or in the mercantile heart of Qarth, but in a place that existed outside of time itself. It was there, in the haunted and crumbling Hall of 1,000 Thrones, that she would be forced to see the full weight of her family's history. The warlocks of Qarth were no mere charlatans. Their guild, the Undying Ones, were reputed to possess a wisdom that spanned centuries, a wisdom that could only be found by descending into their blighted, labyrinthine stronghold. Daenerys journeyed into the mystical heart of Qarth to seek guidance from the warlocks. It was a desperate act, born of isolation and a burning need for the truth. The gates of Qarth were closing around her, and the only path forward was through the ghost-ridden halls of the Undying. They promised her wisdom, but they intended to consume her. Still, she walked into their lair, the walls weeping with a strange phosphorescence, the air thick with the scent of strange spices and ancient death. The warlocks were masters of illusion, but their power was rooted in a terrible truth, the truth of prophecy. They showed her visions, not of her choosing, but of their design. Or, so they thought. The magic of the Undying was a mirror, and in that mirror, Daenerys saw the past. The vision was as clear as a summer morning, yet as heavy as a winter frost. She saw a man whose hair was spun of silver and gold, a prince armoured in black steel, rubies scattered like drops of blood across his throat. Rhaegar Targaryen. He stood in a tower, a place of isolated stone and blood-soaked sheets. A woman with a wolf's heart lay dying in a bed, having just given birth. Rhaegar held the child, a son, and spoke the name Aegon, but he did not speak of crowns or conquest. He spoke of a song. He said the boy's song was not the same as Rhaenyra's or Elia's. He said the dragon must have 3 heads, and then his voice softened, and he spoke the words that would bind the boy's fate to the very fabric of prophecy. He is the prince that was promised, Rhaegar declared, and his is the song of ice and fire. The words hung in the air like a sacred oath. The vision was Rhaegar's last testament, his final explanation for every choice he made, every war he started, every life he sacrificed. This Aegon was not just a son, he was the prince that was promised. For Daenerys, the realization was immediate and profound. Her brother Viserys had spent his life screaming about being the dragon, about his birthright. His death on the golden crown of molten gold was a fitting end for a counterfeit king. But this vision showed her the difference between a claimant and a chosen one. Rhaegar was chosen. His death, his children's deaths, the entire downfall of House Targaryen, it was not a random tragedy. It was a sacrifice. The realization that her brother's death was part of a much larger, ancient tapestry of prophecy settled into her bones. Viserys was a shadow. Rhaegar was the light that cast it. Daenerys suddenly understood that she was not fighting for a broken crown. She was stepping into a river of fate that had been flowing for thousands of years. A current that ran deep beneath the doom of Valyria itself. But the Undying were not done with her. The visions turned cold. They showed her a throne of swords, a frozen landscape, and then they began to whisper. The haunting whispers of the Undying, warning her of the betrayals she must face on her journey, filled the chamber. Their voices were a dry rasp, like stone grinding against stone. They spoke of the future, not with clarity, but with a poisonous warning. 3 treasons will you know, they hissed. Once for blood, once for gold, once for love. These were not riddles to be solved, but bonds to be broken. They were a curse disguised as counsel. The weight of prophecy married to the weight of suspicion. They haunted her, these warnings, because they were specific. They targeted the very trust she needed to survive. Daenerys burned the house of the Undying to ash. She broke their power forever, but the scorch marks of their warnings remained in her mind. She knew now that the song of ice and fire was not a metaphor. It was a person. It was the child Rhaegar named Aegon, born of a stark winter and a dragon's fire. The existence of that child was a secret worth dying for, secret that Rhaegar took to his grave on the banks of the Trident, the secret that Lyanna Stark whispered to her brother Eddard as she bled out in the Tower of Joy, a promise made to protect the final piece of the prophecy. Daenerys had watched a silver prince name his son and speak of a song of ice and fire. The vision faded, and the House of the Undying pulled her deeper into its labyrinth of prophecies. The visions that followed were not gentle whispers of the past, but sharp and terrible warnings of what was to come. They were images stripped of context, meant to be interpreted, or perhaps intended to mislead. She saw a great hall. It was a castle built of stone, soaked in rain and blood. A feast was laid out, but the feast was a lie. There sat a king, crowned with a crown of bronze, wrapped in the pelt of a wolf. His hands were nailed to the table, his head taken from his shoulders. The guests were not living men, but corpses, their eyes staring at nothing. A wolf with wings of blood wept for a wedding that promised peace, but delivered only slaughter. This was a vision of the Red Wedding. Though Daenerys could not know the names of those who died here, she only saw the aftermath of a broken guest rite, and the taste of a bitter, bloody betrayal. The air grew cold. The dead hall vanished. In its place, a wall of ice stretched upward into an impossible darkness. There was a chink in this wall, a small crack in the frozen architecture, and from this crack grew a majestic blue flower. Its petals were delicate, its colour a deep and vibrant hue, and it filled the air with an overwhelming sweetness, a scent of pine and snow, and something else, something that smelled like a promise kept in a tower of joy. The flower was a secret. It was the union of ice and fire, the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna, the wolf and the dragon. It was the prince that was promised, hidden in the north, surrounded by ice, waiting for a destiny that would shake the very foundations of the world. The scene shifted again. Daenerys found herself walking through a ruined throne room. The great roofs of the Red Keep were open to the sky. Snow fell gently upon the tattered hangings and the broken shields of houses long gone. At the centre of this ruin, untouched by frost but covered in a blanket of white, stood the Iron Throne. It was a monstrous thing of 1,000 swords, now humbled by the cold, her destiny. It stood alone in a dead city. The snow was not just winter, it was the cost. It was the long night. It was the death of a dynasty to save a world. She had come so far to sit on that throne, that this vision whispered a terrible warning. What was the point of a throne if the kingdom was ash and ice? Then came the voices, not visions, but words from the Undying Ones themselves. They called her the Slayer of Lies. They showed her a cloth dragon, carried by a cheering crowd, a great stone beast breathing shadow fire, a crowned stag with a false light. The world, they whispered, was full of false prophets, false kings, false saviours, a pretender in the east, wearing a dragon's banner, a false light on the wall, burning through the darkness. These were the lies she was destined to slay. She was a purging force against those who claimed a destiny that was not their own. The Undying warned her of this burden. She was the flame that would burn away the falsehoods before the true dawn could come. The visions broke apart like glass. Daenerys found herself standing again in the throne room of the Warlocks. She had seen the past, the present, and the future. She had been given warnings, but not instructions. The prophecies were clear, but their meanings were cloaked in symbols. The Feast of Corpses, the blue flower, the snow-covered throne, the Slayer of Lies. Each image was a thread in a tapestry she was only beginning to understand. The Undying had shown her what she needed to see, but their intentions were never entirely benevolent. Prophecy is a blade without a hilt, and with these visions burning in her mind, Daenerys Targaryen knew that her path was laid out before her, paved with fire, ice, and the blood of those who stood in her way. But the House of the Undying was not finished with her yet. The chamber of the Warlocks grew darker, the walls pulsing like the interior of some ancient dying beast. Before her, the Undying Ones themselves began to stir. They spoke not in unison, but in a chaotic chorus of dry, papery voices that seemed to echo inside her very skull. 3 fires must you light, they whispered. 1 for life, 1 for death, and 1 to love. 3 mounts must you ride. 1 to bed, 1 to dread, and 1 to love. 3 treasons will you know. Once for blood, once for gold, and once for love. The blue hearts of the Undying glowed with a sickening rot-like light. They drifted closer, their cold, withered hands reaching out to touch her, to drain the warmth from her living flesh. They wanted her fire. They wanted her dragons. But Daenerys was not a victim. She was the mother of dragons. At her shoulder, Drogon stirred. His black scales rippled, and his chest swelled with a sudden fierce heat. With a deafening roar, he unleashed a torrent of black and scarlet flame. The fire caught the ancient dry tapestries, and the withered flesh of the Warlocks began to burn like dry tinder. The illusion shattered. The beautiful, terrifying labyrinth became a screaming inferno of smoke and ash. Daenerys ran, her heart hammering against her ribs, guided only by the desperate instinct to survive. She burst through the heavy bronze doors, stumbling out into the blinding sunlight of Qarth, gasping for the sweet, clean air of the living world. Behind her, The House of the Undying collapsed into a heap of smouldering stone and black soot. Piet Pri screamed in agony and rage, but Daenerys did not look back. She had entered the temple as a seeker of truth, and she emerged as something far more dangerous. The prophecies would haunt her dreams, and the threat of the three treasons would breed a lingering poison of suspicion in her heart. Yet she now knew who she was. She was the storm. She was the dragon, and the world would burn before she let it break her. Daenerys Targaryen emerged from the House of the Undying forever changed. The visions she had witnessed, a silver prince naming his son, a feast of corpses beneath a cold ceiling, a blue flower blooming from a wall of ice, were heavy with meaning, but the truth of them was not yet clear. As she returned to the world of the living, the dusty red streets of Qarth awaited her, full of spies and merchants and schemers. And it was here, even before the warlocks trapped her, that a different kind of voice began to whisper at the edges of her path. A woman in a lacquered mask, red as blood, made of wood and hiding every feature. A ruby glinted at her throat, catching the light like a captive flame. She was a shadowbinder from the far east, from the city of Ashai by the shadow, and her name was Quaithe. Quaithe is one of the most enigmatic figures in the world of ice and fire. She does not demand a throne. She does not seek armies. She stands in the margins and she speaks in riddles. Her warnings to Daenerys are not a single prophecy, but a collection of fragments that grow more urgent with each encounter. She first appeared to Daenerys at the very gates of Qarth, telling her to beware of the painted dogs, to beware the warlocks, to beware everyone. And when Daenerys emerged from the House of the Undying, having burned the warlocks alive and freed her dragons, Quaithe's warnings did not stop, they deepened. The most famous of her riddles is a paradox that has haunted readers for years. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Let us sit with that for a moment. Daenerys wants the Iron Throne in the west. She is stranded in the east. The riddle suggests that she cannot simply sail home. To be strong enough to survive the winter, the long night that Aegon the Conqueror dreamed of, she must first conquer the cities of Slavers Bay, which lie to the south of her path. She must descend into the chaos of Meereen, must learn to rule and to break the chains before she can ever set foot in Westeros. The shadow, perhaps, is the shadow of Ashai, the mysterious city at the edge of the known world. Or perhaps it is the shadow of her own destiny, the darker impulses of her blood. She must pass through fire and darkness to find the light. Quaithe reappears to Daenerys long after Qarth, in the quiet of her chambers in Meereen. She speaks to her through the burning of a glass candle, a form of magic that can see across continents. She warns her of the perfumed seneschal. This phrase is a riddle in itself. The seneschal of Meereen, Resnak Mo Resnak, was her closest servant, a man who smelled of rosewater and sweet oils. Daenerys could barely stand the scent of him. Was he the traitor, or was it Varys, the spider in the Red Keep, whose whispers had destroyed her family, whose agents were everywhere? The ship that carried Tyrion Lannister toward her was called the Selaisori Corran, which means the fragrant steward. The prophecy pointed in every direction, which meant it pointed at everyone. She warns Daenerys of the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. The Sun's Son is Quentyn Martell, the Prince of Dawn, who came seeking her hand in marriage and was burned alive for reaching too close to a chained dragon. The Mummer's Dragon is Aegon Targaryen, a feigned prince, a boy wrapped in a story woven by Varys and Illyrio, a dragon made of cloth and lies. She warns her of the lion and the griffin. The lion is Tyrion Lannister, who carries his own bitterness and his own hunger for vengeance. The griffin is Jon Connington, a dead man walking, a lord who failed Rhaegar and would do anything to put a dragon on the throne. She warns her of the dark flame and the kraken, Mokoro, the red priest of raw law, whose fire magic is strong and whose intentions are hidden. Victarion Greyjoy, a brute in search of a bride and a weapon, carrying a dragon horn that can bind a beast to his will. Quaithe tells her plainly, Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed seneschal. The glass candles are burning. Come to me. But Daenerys does not go to Asshai. She chooses her own path. She stays to rule Meereen, to fight the Harpy, to break the cycles of slavery. And this defiance, this choice to stay in the east, makes Quaithe's warnings even sharper, because Daenerys is surrounded by every faction the Shadowbinder named. They converge on her city like wolves drawn to a fire. The Yunkish armies march against her. The wise masters send emissaries. The Volantine fleet raises its banners. And all of them, every single one of them, wants to control her dragons. Her children were growing wild. Drogon was a beast of the Dothraki Sea, untouchable and free. Viserion and Rhaegar were chained beneath the Great Pyramid, restless and smoking in the darkness. Every lord who entered Meereen cast a hungry eye toward the bronze doors, behind which the great beast stirred. The warlocks had tried to take them. The Spice Kings had tried to buy them. The enemies of Meereen dreamt of stealing them, or killing them, or binding them to their own blood. Daenerys knew this. Quaithe had warned her, but knowing a thing and facing a thing are not the same. And perhaps the most damaging effect of Quaithe's prophecies was not the warnings themselves, but the isolation they created. Daenerys could not trust anyone. Sir Barristan, the most loyal knight who had ever lived, was a reminder of the fathers she had lost. Daario Naharis, her lover, was a sellsword whose heart might turn for the right price. Missandei was a child of Narth, a former slave who saw the world differently from a queen. Grey Worm was a soldier, faithful to his orders, but whose orders would he follow when the moment came? Daenerys ruled from a throne of suspicion. She smiled at her courtiers, while her mind measured them for daggers. The perfume of a servant became a sign of conspiracy. A kind word became a trap. Quaithe had not given her a map. She had given her a cage of whispers and half-truths that kept Daenerys locked inside her own head. There is nothing more isolating than a prophecy whispered in the dark. You cannot ask it questions. You cannot verify its sources. You can only carry it, heavy and hot, like a sealed jar of wildfire in your chest, waiting for the moment the glass finally cracks. And so Daenerys did not follow Quaithe into the shadow. She did not sail to Asshai by the world's end. She chose the hard path, the path of the ruler, the path of the queen, who would break every chain and then sail home. But the riddle echoed in her mind with every step. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. She had come east. She had gone south. She had passed through fire and blood and betrayal. Had she touched the light? Or was the light still waiting, beyond the next horizon, beyond the next betrayal, beyond the next burning? The fire of the dragon does not ask for permission. It does not ask for prophecy. It simply burns. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Quaithe's riddles left Daenerys circling a throne of mystery, unable to touch it, unable to let it go. The Shadowbinder's warnings forced a constant state of self-interrogation. But the deepest riddle she faces is not about directions or manticores. It is about her own right to the prophecy her family has worshipped for generations. The question of the prince that was promised hangs over Daenerys like a crown she can see but cannot grasp. To understand why Daenerys Snow can claim this title, we must first understand the foundational error that shaped the entire search for the prince that was promised. Maester Aemon spent his final days at the Wall, trying to make sense of the tragedy of his family. He had guided Rhaegar from afar, sending him scrolls and tomes on prophecy. Rhaegar was certain the prince that was promised was a king of his line. He read it in the stars, or so he believed. But Aemon, in his final conversation with Samwell Tarly, realized something Rhaegar had missed. In High Valyrian, the word for prince is entirely gender neutral. The prophecy did not say he, it said they, or the one. The entire lineage of Targaryen prophecy, from the woods of Summerhall to the fields of the Trident, was built on the simple act of a translator choosing a masculine word. The prince that was promised did not have to be a man at all. This opens the gate for Daenerys Targaryen. She fulfills almost every literal requirement of the prophecy. She was born on Dragonstone, while a terrible storm raged, connecting her to the salt and smoke. She woke dragons from stone. She is unburnt. Her claim is so strong that many in the fandom point to her as the undisputed Azor Ahai in the books. The language of the prophecy seems tailored to her journey, yet Jon Snow stands as the counterclaim. He is the blood of Rhaegar Targaryen, the man who tied his entire existence to this prophecy. Jon is the prince that was promised, in the sense that he is the living embodiment of the Song of Ice and Fire. His very blood is a compromise between the fire of the Targaryens and the ice of the Starks. In the books, Jon's role is more messianic. He is the leader who dies and is reborn, mirroring the symbolic death and rebirth of Azor Ahai. The prophecy of the bleeding star, the child of the king and the grieving woman, fits Jon's birth perfectly. The HBO adaptation faced a difficult choice. They had two compelling protagonists who both fit the prophecy. The show decided to split the prophetic burden. Jon was given the leadership. He was the commander, the king in the north, the one who brought wildlings and northerners together. He was the strategist against the long night. Daenerys was given the power. She was the breaker of chains, the mother of dragons, the one who possessed the raw military force. This created a fundamental tension in the later seasons. Jon had the title and the story. Daenerys had the tools and the claim. The show resolved this by denying Daenerys the clean heroism of the prophecy and giving Jon the sacrificial martyrdom. This is where George R.R. Martin's lore diverges most sharply from the screen adaptation. In the books, prophecy is a flawed, dangerous game. Martin constantly undermines the idea that there is a single savior who will simply ride in and fix everything. The competing claims of Daenerys and Jon are not a simple binary. They are complicated by the existence of Aegon VI, by the manipulations of Varys and Illyrio, by the presence of Euron Greyjoy, who might be a dark parody of Azor Ahai. The books are a garden of forking paths. The show is a single road to a final battle. The show's Aegon's dream, revealed in House of the Dragon, frames the prophecy as a specific knowable goal: unite the realm against the cold. This is a functional prophecy. It gives the characters a mission. Martin's books, on the other hand, treat the prince that was promised as a tainted concept, a belief that led Rhaegar to start a war, Aemon to doubt his existence, and Melisandre to burn people alive. The book prophecy is a test of character, not a clear destiny. The linguistic knot at the heart of the prophecy, the mistranslation that confused prince and princess, reflects a larger truth about the nature of storytelling. The story itself is a song, and its meaning changes depending on who is singing it. As the characters on both sides of the narrow sea grapple with who the promised one truly is, they are forced to realize that the identity of the savior might be less important than the actions required to become one. The role of the prince is not inherited. It is forged, often in the very fire that is meant to destroy the world. We heard the prince that was promised, debated in the Maester's chambers, its meaning questioned, its gender untangled. The word is neutral. The identity is a mystery. It is a puzzle with two pieces that do not yet fit completely. This ambiguity is not a gift. It is a trap. A prophecy with an open identity invites the world to rush in and fill it with its own desperate hopes. The most fervent rush comes from the east. Melisandre of Asshai arrives on the shores of Dragonstone with a singular purpose. She stares into the flames of the Lord of Light and sees a king. Stannis Baratheon draws a sword from a stone, a trick of embers and will, and she knows she has found Azor Ahai reborn. The problem with Melisandre is not doubt. She is perhaps the most faithful servant of her god in the entire story, but faith is not the same as accuracy. She births a shadow to murder Renly Baratheon, removing a legitimate claimant to the throne and splintering the anti-Lannister alliance. She pursues King's blood with a holy zeal, hunting Edric Storm and ultimately sacrificing Shireen Baratheon on a frozen pyre. Every step is taken in the name of prophecy. Every horror is justified as a necessary sacrifice to win the great war against the darkness. But she has identified the wrong champion. Stannis is not the prince that was promised. He is a good man broken by a weight he was never meant to carry. The fire of the Red Temple burned through his family, his honor, and his realm. All because the prophet who followed him saw a reflection in the flames and mistook it for the truth. Across the narrow sea, a different claim rises. In Volantis, the High Priest Benero declares Daenerys Targaryen to be the chosen one. The Red Priest Mokoro sets sail to find her, carrying the same gospel that Melisandre preached in the north. Daenerys is a woman from a line of dragon dreams. She walked into a pyre and emerged unburnt, mother of the living embodiments of fire. It is easy to see why the temple chose her. She looks like the prophecy. She has the dragons. She has the ambition. But the Red Faith does not simply observe her destiny. It begins to write it for her. The priests speak of her as the living flame sent to banish the darkness. Every victory confirms their theology. Every atrocity is reframed as a step toward dawn. The Targaryen tradition of dragon dreaming was never a public religion. Daenys the Dreamer saw the doom of Valyria and whispered her warning to her father. Aegon the Conqueror dreamed of a cold darkness sweeping from the north, a threat that required a united realm. These were family secrets, private burdens, visions passed from ruler to heir. They were not sermons. The Red Faith lacks this context. They take the concept of the prince that was promised and impose it on a young girl who is already struggling with the weight of her own identity. The confirmation bias is overwhelming. When Daenerys liberates slaves, it is a sign of the Saviour. When she crucifies masters, it is a sign of righteous fire. When she burns King's Landing, it becomes a messy theological problem that the faith must bend to accommodate. The true Targaryen prophecy warned of an existential war against the cold. The Red Faith turned that existential warning into a political crusade. They took a dragon dream and made it a religion of conquest. The dream warped into a demand for absolute power. The immense suffering caused by this misinterpretation cannot be overstated. Melisandre's actions in Westeros single-handedly destroyed the stability of the rebellion. The shadow of Renly Baratheon's death echoes through the entire war, prolonging it, deepening it. The sacrifice of Shireen is a wound on the soul of the narrative. A child burned by her father for the sake of a prophecy that was never meant for him. In Essos, the religious fervour of the Red Temple pushes Daenerys toward a messianic complex. She begins to see herself as the answer to the world's prayers. Every enemy of the faith must burn. Every city that resists must fall. The dragon dreams of her ancestors were warnings, not blueprints. They were meant to prepare a ruler, not to create a god. Acting on incomplete prophecies is the surest way to cause a catastrophe. The characters who do are not villains. They are believers. But belief without humility is a wildfire. It consumes the believer and everyone they love. When the false prophets are stripped away and the misread signs are corrected, what remains is the core of the dragon dream itself, not the religion built around it, but the raw, terrifying vision of a future that requires a single person to make an impossible choice. The Song of Ice and Fire cannot be sung by a choir. It demands a single singer, standing at the end of the world, holding a blade of fire. When Melisandre looked into the flames for Azor Ahai, she saw Stannis Baratheon, the Red Priests of Essos, from Volantis to Meereen, proclaimed Daenerys Targaryen as the Warrior of Light reborn. But in the ancient lore of House Targaryen, there is another prophecy, one that predates even the doom of Valyria. It is the belief that the dragon must have 3 heads. The enduring mystery of who will ride the remaining 2 dragons alongside Daenerys has captivated readers and viewers for years. With Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion hatched from stone, the question of their riders becomes central to the story. In the books, the dragons are growing, but their bonds with humans are still evolving. The show gave us one clear answer. Jon Snow, whose true heritage as the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark connects him directly to Rhaegal. This theory rooted in the books as well, suggests that Jon's bloodline allows him to claim the dragon named after his father. It is a popular interpretation, one that aligns with the narrative of the hidden prince returning to fulfill his destiny. But the third head remains a subject of intense speculation. Among the most persistent theories is that Tyrion Lannister might also be a Targaryen, a child of the Mad King Aerys and Joanna Lannister. This would explain his fascination with dragons, his intelligence, and his unexpected affinity for these creatures. In the books, Tyrion's dragon dreams and his knowledge of dragon lore hint at a deeper connection. He has a curious bond with the beasts, a sense of familiarity that goes beyond mere study. If true, Tyrion could be the third head, alongside Daenerys and Jon, completing the triad. The prophecy of the dragon having 3 heads is not just a mystical statement, it is a narrative necessity. Aegon the Conqueror forged Westeros with his sister Wives and their 3 dragons. To face the coming darkness, it is said that 3 dragon riders must unite. This vision requires 3 distinct figures, each with their own claim, their own destiny, to balance the power and fulfill the ancient prophecy. Without them, the realm cannot stand against what is coming. Who will ride the remaining 2 dragons alongside Daenerys? The theories of Jon Snow and Tyrion Lannister are rooted in the texts, but the full answer remains shrouded in mystery. George R.R. Martin has left clues scattered throughout the books, waiting to be assembled. Whether in the books or the show, the identity of the 3 heads is a cornerstone of the series' endgame. The dragon has 3 heads, and each head must carry its own weight in the battle to come. As the story hurtles toward its conclusion, the bonds between dragon and rider will be tested, and the truth of the prophecy will be revealed in fire and blood. Yet, the path to finding these 3 riders is fraught with deception and false claimants. In the novels, a wild card exists in the form of young Griff, a youth claiming to be Aegon Targaryen, the 6th of his name and the supposedly deceased son of Rhaegar. If he is indeed who he claims to be, his right to ride one of the beasts would be practically indisputable. However, many fans suspect he is a false dragon, a Blackfyre pretender sent to muddy the waters. If young Griff is the Mummer's dragon Daenerys was warned about in the House of the Undying, his attempts to claim a dragon could end in disaster, much like the tragic fate of Quentyn Martell. Quentyn, a prince of Dorne with a distant drop of Targaryen blood, believed his ancestry would protect him. His fiery demise at the hands of Rhaegar served as a brutal reminder to readers that the blood of the dragon is not a guarantee of safety, but a dangerous, volatile spark. Then there is the threat of stolen power. Victarion Greyjoy sails toward Meereen carrying Dragonbinder, a massive horn bound in Valyrian steel and glyphs of fire. The horn is said to compel dragons to obey the horn's master, but at a terrible price. Whoever blows it dies, their lungs charred to ash. If Euron Greyjoy, the sinister mastermind behind the horn, manages to bind one of Daenerys' children from afar, the 3 heads of the dragon may not be allies at all, but bitter enemies forced into a civil war of apocalyptic proportions. We must also consider the mystical potential of Bran Stark. The 3-eyed raven promised him that while he would never walk again, he would fly. While many assumed this referred to skin changing into crows, the sheer scale of Bran's green-seeing power suggests he could potentially slip into the mind of a dragon. A warged dragon would bypass the need for Targaryen blood entirely, merging the ancient magic of the first men with the fire of old Valyria. Ultimately, the tragedy of the 3 heads may lie in their division. In the television adaptation, the icy spear of the Night King shattered the triad before it could ever truly unite, turning Viserion into a weapon of the dead. This twist suggests that the prophecy might not be a triumphant song of 3 heroic riders, but a bittersweet melody of sacrifice. Whether the 3 heads represent Jon, Tyrion, a Greyjoy, or a Stark, the destiny of Westeros hangs on who can master the flames before the cold consumes them all. The search for the 3 heads of the dragon is the great riddle of the series, pointing to Jon Snow, to Daenerys, to the scattered remnants of a broken house. But the deeper tragedy is the pattern itself. The more the Targaryens believed in the prophecy, the more it destroyed them. Their history is not a straight line towards a destined savior, but a cycle of self-inflicted wounds, all made in the desperate attempt to control a future glimpsed in a dream. It begins with the dream that saved them. Daenys the Dreamer saw the doom of Valyria. It was a gift that preserved their line, but that success planted a seed of absolute reliance on prophetic dreams. Rhaenyra Targaryen moved his family to Dragonstone because of a vision. Aegon the Conqueror united a continent because of a vision of the Long Night. Every major decision was made in the service of a future glimpsed in a half-remembered dream. This is where the tragedy takes root. The Targaryens desperately attempted to prevent a future darkness by uniting the realm under Dragonfire, but the Dragonfire itself created the divisions that would ensure the darkness could not be stopped. The brutal conquest bred resentment. The absolute power corrupted the bloodline. Look at Viserys I. In the story of the Dance of the Dragons, he carries the burden of Aegon's dream. He whispers it to Rhaenyra, believing a single, unified Targaryen ruler must sit the Iron Throne to save the world. So he keeps the succession ambiguous, hoping the strength of the prophecy will hold his family together. His desperate attempt to fulfill the dream directly causes the Dance of the Dragons. The war kills the dragons. It shatters the realm. The very unity required to face the Long Night is destroyed in the cradle by the fear of the Long Night. The prophecy becomes a self-fulfilling tragedy. They sacrifice the present for a future that never came, and in doing so, crippled the power that could have saved them. This cycle repeats across the centuries. Rhaegar Targaryen becomes obsessed with the prince that was promised. He reads, he trains, he believes he is the one. When he decides he needs a third child, believing the dragon must have 3 heads, he runs off with Lyanna Stark. This act of prophecy triggers Robert's rebellion. The rebellion nearly wipes out the Targaryen dynasty. Thousands die, the realm bleeds, and at the Trident, Rhaegar dies, leaving his infant son to carry the burden of a prophecy he barely understands. Foresight leads directly to madness and ruin. Aerys II heard prophecies in his own paranoia, leading to the orders that sealed the dynasty's doom. The dreams do not offer clarity, they offer obsession. This brings us to the philosophical question at the heart of the Targaryen legacy. Are the dragon dreams a gift from the gods or a trap set by fate? Every time a Targaryen acts on a dream, they assume they are the hero of the story. Daenys was. Aegon might have been. But Rhaegar, Aerys, Daenerys? The dreams feel like a lifeline, but they function exactly like a trap. They offer a vision of salvation so tempting that the dreamer justifies any horror to achieve it. They tempt the dreamer to prioritize a mythical future over the immediate reality of the realm. The realm starves while the king dreams of winter. The people burn while the queen dreams of spring. The cost is always the present. Daenerys Targaryen is the culmination of this tragedy. Her entire journey is guided by prophecy, Quaithe's warnings, the House of the Undying visions. She's repeatedly told she is the savior. She believes it deeply. She must break the wheel. She must save the world. But the iron price of this prophesied destiny is her mercy, her patience, her humanity. In the show's final season, when she looks at King's Landing, she sees the obstacle to the future she was promised, and she burns it all. She becomes the very tyrant the prophecy was supposed to prevent. The dream of spring leads directly to a winter of ash. She prioritized the mythical future over the immediate reality of the realm, and the realm turned to dust in her hands. The legacy of dragon dreams is a bitter one, a tool that promises control but delivers chaos. A light that guides the dreamer directly into the abyss. The Targaryens were defined not by their dragons, but by the dreams that drove them. They were so busy looking for the dawn that they walked directly into the dark. The dream becomes a mirror. The Targaryens stared into it, searching for the savior of the world, and saw only themselves reflected, their ambition, their fear, and every time they struck at the glass, they bled. The tragedy of the Targaryens is the story of fate, forcing its way through a door they left unlocked. The dreams are not a curse or a blessing, but a test that for thousands of years, a family of dragon lords could never pass. The cycle waits for the next ambitious heart to try and bend fate to their will, only to discover that fate has been bending them all along. The prophecy remains, the burden remains, and the song of ice and fire waits for someone who can listen without being consumed by the melody. The previous chapter traced the tragedy of prophecy's self-fulfillment. How every attempt by the blood of the dragon to outrun their dreams only pulled them deeper into the current of destiny. But a current must flow somewhere. A prophecy, no matter how twisted by interpretation or weaponized by ambition, must eventually break against the shore of a real moment. For Aegon the Conqueror's dream, that moment arrived in the snows of the far north, 3 centuries after he forged the Iron Throne. The enemy his dragon dreams had warned him about finally made its move. The wall, a barrier of ice built by Brandon the Builder and imbued with ancient magic, came crashing down. The army of the dead, a body of pure cold, spilled into the lands of men. This was the culmination of the threat Aegon glimpsed before the conquest. It was never about a rival king crossing the Blackwater. It was never about a Targaryen pretender. It was the total extinction of all living memory, a winter that would never end. The desperate defense of Winterfell became the stage where the song of ice and fire was finally sung. The Starks, the blood of the first men who had held the North for thousands of years, stood alongside the Unsullied, the Dothraki, the wildlings who had crossed the wall, and the Knights of the Vale. But above all, they stood alongside the last Targaryens. Daenerys Stormborn brought her dragons into the heart of the northern winter. The forces of fire and the forces of ice merged, not because they loved each other, but because the survival of the world demanded it. In the chaos of the battle, the distinction between savior and survivor vanished. The night was dark and full of terrors. The Dothraki horde, whose scream was meant to terrify, was extinguished in moments. The dragons fought the dead in the sky. Jon Snow, the son of ice and fire, faced the army of his enemies. And in the Godswood, the heart of Winterfell, the final act played out. This is the moment the Valyrian steel dagger's 300-year journey reached its end. Think about the sheer improbability of its alignment. This blade was forged in the fires of the Valyrian freehold. A remnant of the same civilization Daenys, the dreamer, saw consumed by the doom. It likely rested at Aegon the Conqueror's hip when he first set foot in Westeros. A symbol of Targaryen power, a tool of the prophecy that drove their conquest. From Aegon's hip, the dagger passed through unknown hands for centuries. It was lost. It was stolen. It reappeared in King's Landing, held by the spy master Varys. It was given to a simpleton, a catspaw, and used in a failed attempt to assassinate Bran Stark in his own bed. The blade meant to unite a realm was used to attempt the murder of a child of winter. Littlefinger, the master manipulator who orchestrated the chaos, carried it as a token of his schemes. He lost it to Bran Stark, the three-eyed raven, who saw its entire history in the weave of time. Bran understood the weight of the weapon. He gave it to his sister, Arya Stark, a girl who was no one, who became a faceless man, but who chose her identity as a Stark of Winterfell. She trained to face death itself. And when the Night King entered the Godswood, bringing the cold that threatened to end the world, the dagger that belonged to the Dragon Lords was in the hands of a daughter of the North. The Valyrian steel blade that hung from Aegon the Conqueror's belt pierced the heart of the Night King. The army of the dead shattered. The winter broke. The prophecy Aegon had carried for 300 years was fulfilled, not by a king or a queen, but by a girl with a dagger. The weapon's journey, from the fires of Valyria to the snows of Winterfell, was complete. But prophecies, once realized, have a way of demanding a price. This is the bittersweet truth of Aegon's dream. He saw the threat. He built the kingdom to face it. He united the realm. The realm was united. Ice and fire fought together, and they won. but the cost was the dynasty that bore the dream. Jon Snow, the last male heir of House Targaryen, was forced to end the life of Daenerys Targaryen, the last queen of the house, in the ashes of the Red Keep. The dragons were gone. Daenerys died. Jon was exiled. The Targaryen line, preserved through the doom, nurtured through the generations, and guided by dragon dreams for so long, was spent. The throne they had built was melted down. The kingdom they created was divided. Aegon saw the threat. He united the realm to face it. The realm faced it and won. But the dream did not show him that the path to that victory would extinguish his entire bloodline. The Targaryens were the dreamers. They were the protectors. And when the protection was complete, they were gone. The dream of Aegon the Conqueror was realized at the exact moment the House of the Dragon ceased to exist. The Song of Ice and Fire was sung in the War for the Dawn. The singers, the last embers of the dragon's flame, were snuffed out by the cold they helped defeat. The bittersweet realization is that the House of the Dragon succeeded in its ancient purpose, and in its success found its end. What remains when the final dream is fulfilled? Every Targaryen prophecy and dragon dream was a thread in the same tapestry. Daenys saw the doom. Aegon saw the darkness. Rhaenyra and Viserys and Daenerys all carried the song. And looking at the full weaving, you see exactly how a family can be blessed with foresight and cursed by it. Able to see the flood but powerless to find any shore but the one their visions created for them. The burden of seeing the future without the power to change its ultimate cost lingers in the silence left behind by the last dragon. The White Walkers are defeated. The long night cut short by a blade that centuries ago was forged for a king who dreamed of winter. But the Song of Ice and Fire does not end so neatly as a single battle. The legacy of the dragon dreams stretches far beyond the War for the Dawn. Consider the architectural and political landscape of Westeros. The Iron Throne itself, that brutal monument forged from the swords of Aegon's enemies, was built to rule a unified realm, and the realm was unified for a purpose: survival. Aegon did not conquer the Seven Kingdoms just for the glory of a crown. He did it because his dreams told him that winter would come, a winter that would destroy the realm if it remained divided. The entire political structure of the Seven Kingdoms, from the bureaucracy of King's Landing to the system of great councils, was designed to maintain stability against that coming darkness. The great fortresses of Dragonstone and the Red Keep were not merely homes. Dragonstone was a citadel of Valyrian magic, a place where dragons and prophecies intertwined. The painted table in the chamber of the Dragonstone was a war room, a monument to the ambition of a unified military response. The succession policies designed to keep the blood of the dragon strong were policies born of necessity, not just pride. The culture of the Targaryen dynasty, their exceptionalism, their isolation, their very identity, was cultivated around this singular vision. They were not just kings ruling over lesser houses. They were the guardians of mankind, the gatekeepers of the world's salvation. At least, that is what their dreams told them. The architecture of King's Landing, the massive dome of the Dragon Pit, the very roads connecting the realm, were all shadows of the prophetic vision Aegon carried with him from the beginning. But time has a way of turning sacred truths into old wives' tales. As the Targaryen line stretched and frayed across the centuries, the dragon dreams transitioned from closely guarded royal secrets into myths whispered by the small folk. In the early days of the dynasty, a dragon dream was a matter of state. Daenys the Dreamer was venerated as a saviour. Aegon I was remembered as a prophet, though the specifics of his dream were hidden. By the time of the Dance of the Dragons, the dreams were already becoming weapons used to claim the throne, twisted by ambitious lords and rival claimants. By the time of the Mad King Aerys II, a prophetic dream was seen not as a divine gift from old Valyria, but as a symptom of the infamous Targaryen madness. The very same mad ramblings that predicted doom were the ramblings of a king who thought he was a dragon. The promise of Aegon's dream was hidden away in scrolls and secret conversations. a burden of the crown that few believed in and fewer still understood. The stories of Daenys the Dreamer, the girl who saved the house from the doom, became a fairy tale for children, a story to tell around the hearth. The Song of Ice and Fire became a legend, its truth blurred by centuries of history, corrupted by the songsings of the singers and the deep silence of the citadel, which preferred to forget that magic had ever existed at all. The power of the dreams did not fade, but the world's understanding of them did. The small folk in the villages of the Riverlands tell stories of the mad dragon kings who saw spirits in the flames. They do not know that those same visions once saved the world from extinction. The truth became a myth, and the myth became a joke. For the surviving members of the bloodline, the psychological scars of this legacy are profound and deeply personal. Daenerys Targaryen grew up in exile, a beggar princess running from the assassins of the usurper. The very concept of prophecy was woven into her identity from infancy. She was the mother of dragons, the unburnt, the slayer of lies, the weight of being the promised savior, of carrying the future of an entire dynasty on her shoulders, cracked her resolve in ways she never fully understood until the very end. She escaped the chains of her brother Viserys, but she could not escape the cage of her family's prophecies. The dragons were a gift, but they were also a terrible burden. They brought her power, but they also brought her the echoes of the old blood, demanding she claim the throne by fire and blood. She was a breaker of chains, but the heaviest chain was the one her ancestors forged with their dreams of conquest. Jon Snow carries a different kind of scar, but a wound just as deep. He never asked to be the prince that was promised. He never wanted the crown. He was forced into the role, the living embodiment of a secret the Targaryens guarded for 3 centuries. The truth of his parentage was hidden, not just for political safety, but because the weight of that prophecy was a burden no child should ever have to carry. He bears the physical and emotional wounds of a lineage that saw too much, a line of dreamers who were undone by their visions as much as they were defined by them. The legacy of the dragon dreams pressed down on him the moment he learned who he truly was. It forced him to kill the woman he loved, not because of a prophecy, but because of what the prophecy had made her. But perhaps the greatest tragedy of the dragon dreams is their permanent loss. The fall of the Iron Throne represents more than a change in government. It marks the death of the ancient Valyrian connection to the future. The dragons are gone. The magic that fueled the dreams, the strange fire that tied the Targaryens to the cosmic song of the world, has dimmed almost to nothing. Without a dragon rider sitting the throne, without the blood of the dragon actively nurtured by fire and power, the thread that connected the dragon lords to tomorrow has snapped forever. The last dragon dream has been dreamt. The last vision of the future has faded from the waking minds of men. The line of Daenys the Dreamer, which survived the doom of Valyria, which conquered a continent with fire and blood, which dreamed of a song of ice and fire across 3 centuries, that line is now simply a memory. The world is no longer watched over by those who can see what is to come. The future is now just as blind as the past. The burden of that knowledge has been lifted, but so has the safeguard. Humanity must walk forward without a map. The dreamers are gone. The burden of the future has been lifted from the world of men. What remains is the cold, quiet silence of a history that has fulfilled itself. The legacy of the dragon dreams is not just a story of fire and blood. It is a story of a family that saw too much, built a world around that knowledge, and was ultimately undone by its own weight. The scars remain in the survivors. The myths remain in the songs of the small folk. The ruins of their great works remain scattered across the continent. The song of ice and fire has been sung. The prophecies have been fulfilled, or they have failed. The Targaryen story began with a dream and ended with a broken throne. The world must now turn the page, leaving the dragon dreams behind for the chilly reality of a new dawn. The last dragon dream did not end with a prophecy. It ended with a question. What happens to a world that no longer has the fire of prophecy to light its way? It learns to build its own fire, in the hearts of the common people, in the steel of its new kings and queens, in the slow, steady march of time itself. The legacy of the dragon dreams is silence, but it is also the beginning of a new song, a song without dragons, a song without dreams, a song about the cold, hard work of simply living in a world where the future is unknown and must be faced with nothing but courage. From the whispers of the small folk to the myths carved into the stone of Dragonstone, the Song of Ice and Fire reaches its conclusion. The final chapters of this saga are a mirror reflecting the fatal collision of theme and character. The dragon dreams that began with Daenys and guided Aegon the Conqueror do not end in a simple victory. They resolve into a haunting chord where the threads of prophecy, destiny, and human agency are knotted so tightly that they strangle the very dream they were meant to fulfill. In the finale, we witness the full weight of this burden upon Daenerys Targaryen. Her entire life was a prophecy made flesh. Her birth amidst a storm, the waking of dragons from stone, the vision of the snow on the throne in the House of the Undying. These were not simply glimpses of the future. They were the scripted moments of a story she believed she was destined to write. But human agency is the variable that prophecy can never fully control. When Daenerys chose to burn King's Landing, she was not fulfilling a manifest destiny written by Aegon the Conqueror. She was choosing to use the terror of her birthright as a tool for absolute victory. The prophecy gave her the audience. Her agency gave her the tragedy. Look at Jon Snow, the Hidden Prince, the literal embodiment of the Song of Ice and Fire. Every pillar of prophecy, the bleeding star, the salt and smoke, the prince that was promised, rests on his shoulders. But Jon's story is the ultimate expression of human agency rejecting a predetermined destiny. He does not want the throne. He is a man of duty, chosen by his brothers, not by prophecy. His agency is the tragedy of his lineage. He loves Daenerys, but he kills her not to fulfill an ancient dream, but because his duty to the realm demands the hardest of choices. He rejects the very idea of a chosen ruler and ends his story not as a king, but as a ranger walking into the true north. Martin uses Jon to ask the essential question: what if the song was never meant to rule, but simply to endure? So what is the ultimate meaning of the Song of Ice and Fire? It is not a triumphant chorus of a new dawn. It is the purest expression of a balance of destructive forces. The world cannot be saved by fire or ice alone, but must be tempered by both. The Long Night was defeated by a coalition of ice and fire, the frozen spears of the north and the dragon flame of the south. But the aftermath revealed the fragility of that balance. Jon Snow was torn apart by the demands of his dual nature. The song ends with the dragon dying to save the wolves. It is not a victory hymn, it is a warning ballad. It sings of how the desire for a perfect world burns the world down. The dream of the prince that was promised is a beautiful melody, but it is played on strings of fire and blood. This is how George R.R. Martin uses the Targaryen dreams to completely subvert the traditional fantasy trope of the Chosen One. In a standard fantasy, the Chosen One is a validation of destiny. Here the Chosen One is a curse. The Targaryens believed in their own narrative of inherent greatness. They were the protagonists of the world, the Dragon Lords, the chosen blood. This belief was their fatal flaw. Aegon's dream united the continent, but that unity was brittle, held together by the threat of fire. Daenerys was the prince that was promised, and she absolutely fulfilled the requirements of the myth. She brought dragons into the world, and she stood against the cold. But Martin exposes the lie in the trope. Being chosen by prophecy does not make you a good person, it just makes you necessary. The moment of necessity passed, and the realm was left with an emperor of ash. The Targaryens believed their blood made them better. The story proves that their blood only made them more dangerous. The dreams were not a guide to ruling justly. They were a recipe for the absolute certainty that leads to tyranny. Rhaegar Targaryen was so consumed by the prophecy of the prince that was promised that he tore a kingdom apart for it. Viserys I was so bound by Aegon's dream that he lit the fuse on a succession war that nearly burned the realm to the ground. The dream is a poison that looks like a cure for insignificance. The 3 heads of the dragon were never a perfect council of heroes. It was a warning about the nature of the beast itself. This leaves us with the enduring mystery of the dragon dreams and their place in the deeper mythology of the fantasy world. Martin has constructed a magic system where prophecy is real, but its mechanism is intentionally opaque. Are these dreams messages from the gods of Valyria or the Lord of Light, using the Targaryen blood as an instrument, or are they a natural consequence of binding your soul to a dragon, a creature whose consciousness sees time as an ocean rather than a river? The dreams of Daenys were so accurate, they allowed the family to survive the doom, but every dream after that carries the weight of that first salvation, a burden of expectation that the family could never repay. The mystery is not meant to be solved, it is meant to be felt. The dragon dreams are the engine of history, a mysterious wind that pushes the ships of state into the rocks, but no one can say for certain if the wind is natural or divine. The Targaryen legacy is a closed loop of cause and effect. The dream of survival became the dream of conquest. The dream of unity became a civil war. The dream of the savior became a tyrant. The closer the family leaned into their prophecies, the tighter the noose of fate became around their necks. The song has been sung. The player has played his part. The dragon dreams have faded into the echoes of a dynasty that believed too strongly in its own echo. The final observation the story leaves us with is a stark one. The Targaryens were masters of prophecy, but they were slaves to its interpretation. They were the dreamers of dragons, the riders of fire, and the fuel for the fire that consumed their own house. The song is over, but the question of whether the dreams were a blessing of foresight or a curse of inevitability remains, burning silently in the ashes of Valyria. The gift of prophetic dreaming has always set the Targaryens apart, even among the dragon lords of Valyria. While other families commanded the skies with fire and scale, only the Targaryens carried this strange second sight in their blood. It was not a power they could summon or control. It came to them in sleep, unbidden, often wrapped in symbols and shadows that defied clear interpretation. And yet, these dreams shaped the destiny of an entire continent across 3 centuries. The first and most famous of these dreams belonged to Daenys Targaryen, known to history as Daenys the Dreamer. She was the daughter of Aemon Targaryen, the lord who held sway over the remote outpost of Dragonstone. In the years before the doom of Valyria, Daenys woke from a vision of such clarity that it could not be dismissed. She saw her homeland consumed by fire, the earth splitting open, the great empire of the Dragon Lords reduced to ash and ruin. Her father listened. He chose to believe her, and so the Targaryens abandoned Valyria 12 years before the doom fell, carrying their dragons, their wealth, and their household to the safety of Dragonstone. They were the only Dragonlord family to survive. Every other house that had ruled the skies perished in the cataclysm. Daenys' dreams set a precedent that would echo through every generation to follow. The Targaryens learned that dreams could warn, but they also learned that dreams could deceive. Not every vision was a clear map of what was to come. Many were fragments, open to interpretation, and sometimes that interpretation led to ruin. Centuries later, Aegon the Conqueror carried his own dream. He saw not fire from below but cold from above, a winter that would swallow the world, a darkness that would fall from the north. He believed that only a united Westeros could stand against that threat, and so he forged a single kingdom, not merely for glory or conquest, but because he saw what was coming. This dream, passed down through the royal line, became known as the Song of Ice and Fire. It was a prophecy of balance, of a conflict that would demand the loyalty of all 7 kingdoms to overcome. Aegon's dream was not written in any public record. It was whispered from ruler to heir, carried in confidence. When Viserys I shared it with his daughter Rhaenyra, he bound her to a duty that transcended the Iron Throne itself. She was not just to rule but to prepare, and yet the very act of sharing that dream deepened the fractures in the succession. Rhaenyra's claim was already contested. The prophecy became a weapon of legitimacy, wielded by different sides to justify their own ambitions. The vision that was meant to unite the realm instead fed the war that tore it apart. This is the tragedy embedded in the Targaryen gift. The dreams are not instructions, they are impressions, and the people who receive them are flawed, driven by pride, fear, and desire. Aemon the Dragon Knight did not interpret his dreams with perfect accuracy. Aerys II, the Mad King, became consumed by visions of fire and betrayal, his mind curdling into paranoia. Even Rhaegar, the prince who seemed to understand the Song of Ice and Fire with haunting clarity, set events in motion that led to rebellion and death. Daenerys Targaryen inherited this legacy of dreams without ever being taught its history. She saw the Red Keep in ruins, snow falling on a throne of swords. She walked through the House of the Undying and witnessed echoes of past and future, moments that she could not fully understand until she lived them. Her visions were not prophecies in the strict sense. They were glimpses, warnings, offers of hidden knowledge, and like so many before her, she acted on what she saw without fully grasping the cost. The dragon dreams do not provide certainty, they provide possibility. The ancient Valyrians understood this. They tempered their prophecies with skepticism, knowing that to see the future was not to control it, but the Targaryens carried that burden alone. Isolated from the broader magical traditions of the world, they had no Magi to consult, no Shadowbinders to guide them. They had only the dreams and their own understanding, and so the pattern continues. Every generation produces a dreamer, and every dreamer wrestles with meaning. Some dreams warn of disaster, like Daenys' vision of the doom. Some give purpose, like Aegon's impulse to conquer. Some simply confuse, arriving in cryptic symbols that unfold years later. The prophecy of the prince that was promised, the return of Azor Ahai, the song itself. All of these threads weave through Targaryen history without resolving neatly into a single answer. Perhaps that is the point. The dreams are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, carried, and acted upon, even when the outcome is not clear. The Targaryens built their dynasty on a foundation of fear and faith in the unseen. They believed that the blood of the dragon came with a purpose, a duty to stand against the long night. And in the end, that duty was fulfilled not by any one prophecy, but by the choices of individuals who never saw the full picture. The legacy of dragon dreams endures in the stories told about them, in the monuments raised in their shadow, in the wars fought over their interpretation. The song is not finished. It never was. It simply waits for the next dreamer to wake with fire in their mind and the weight of the world ahead of them. The tragedy of the Targaryens is not that their dreams were lies, but that they were true, and that no one ever truly understood what they meant until it was far too late. The previous chapter traced the death of the dragons and the fracture of the family, but the dragon dreams did not die in the rubble of the Red Keep. They became something else, a whisper passed from one reluctant heir to the next, a burden that could not be set down. And in the centuries that followed, the dreams would shape the fate of Westeros just as powerfully as any battle ever fought. Consider Summerhall, the tragedy that killed King Aegon V, the unlikely king, the man they called Egg. He spent his entire reign trying to restore dragons, trying to bring back the fire of his house, because he had seen the signs. The long summer was ending. The darkness was coming from the north, and he knew from the old scrolls that fire must fight the cold. He gathered the greatest maesters, the greatest lords, the remnants of a family haunted by what they had lost. He held a grand ritual at the Summer Palace, and he failed. Summerhall burned. The dragons were not reborn, but from the ash, a new prophecy seeker was born. Rhaegar Targaryen was born on the day of Summerhall. He was born in the fire that killed his great-grandfather, and he became utterly consumed by prophecy. He read the old books, he heard the old songs, and he became convinced that he was the prince that was promised. This was not simple ambition, it was a dragon dream, a compulsion that overrode every other instinct. Rhaegar's certainty infected everything he touched. He took a woman he believed was the ice to his fire. He created a child he named Aegon, the Song of Ice and Fire. He started a war that tore the realm apart, and he died in the shallow water of the Trident, while Lyanna Stark bled out in the Tower of Joy, leaving a child who was the actual song alive in the world, hidden and unnamed. Rhaegar's dream was the mirror of Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon saw the threat and united the realm. Rhaegar saw the threat and shattered it completely. And what of the father? Aerys II, the Mad King, was not always mad. He began his reign hopeful and strong, but captivity in Duskendale broke something in him, and the dragon dreams twisted the wound. He heard voices. He saw fire as the only salvation. He began to see himself as the final dragon, the embodiment of the house. He stored wildfire under the city. He had a secret plan to burn everything. When his son killed him, all that potential energy of destruction was left to wait. The wildfire was Aerys's dragon dream made manifest, a literal fire waiting to consume the city, and it did. Generations later, the dream of the Mad King was finished by the last dragon. Cersei used it to destroy the Great Sept. Daenerys used her dragonfire to destroy the rest. A single vision of fire passed down through the bloodline, a true dream given a false interpretation. 300 years of Targaryen obsession finally spent in a single afternoon of ash. Daenerys Stormborn was the final culmination of every prophecy the bloodline had ever carried. She was the mother of dragons, the unburnt, the slayer of lies. Her journey through the House of the Undying was a prophecy in itself. She saw the Red Keep covered in snow or ash. She saw the throne. She saw the lies. The dragon dreams never gave her the full picture. They gave her fire. They gave her purpose. They did not give her restraint. And when she sat atop Drogon, looking at the Red Keep, she was not Daenerys the Saviour. She was the final dragon dream incarnate. Fire and blood. Not the prince that was promised. The weapon that was promised. And what of Jon Snow, the hidden Targaryen? The boy who never dreamed. He was the song, but he was not the dreamer. He was the answer, but he never heard the riddle. The dragon dreams did not trouble him. The burden of the future was carried by everyone around him. Rhaegar died for him. Ned Stark lied for him. Maester Aemon, blind and ancient on the cinnamon wind, whispered that the prince was promised. I dreamed that I was old. He never knew he was speaking of Jon. The dreams passed him by. The song was already written. The entire edifice of Targaryen prophecy began with a single girl on Dragonstone who dreamed of fire in the distance. Daenys the dreamer saw the doom and saved her family. She passed that gift and that curse down through every generation to follow. From her bloodline came Aegon the Conqueror, Rhaegar the Believer, Daenerys the Bride of Fire, and in the end, the final word on the subject was not spoken by a Targaryen. It was spoken by a memory. Brass Stark, the three-eyed raven, told the lords and ladies of Westeros that Aegon the Conqueror saw the darkness from the north, that the entire conquest, the entire dynasty, the centuries of fire and blood were founded on a single dragon dream. And in that moment, the prophecy was no longer a burden. It was simply a story. A song ended, a truth told to a council of strangers. The dream that built a kingdom was finally spoken aloud. It was true, all of it. But the truth of the vision did not save the dreamers. It consumed them. One by one, from the doom of Valyria to the fall of King's Landing, the dragon dreams burned through their bearers. They burned bright, and then they were gone.